Notice is hereby given that the Board of Directors of the Green Mountain Water and Sanitation District of the County of Jefferson, State of Colorado, will hold a special meeting at 6 p.m. Thursday, February 22nd, 2022. So we've got a 2/22/22 going on tonight at 13919 West Utah Avenue, Lakewood, Colorado 80228. This meeting will be held for the purpose of conducting such business as may come before the board. This meeting is open to the public. Virtual meeting option for those who may not be able to attend in person. The district will offer the option of participating in this meeting by video conference call. To attend, please go to https://us06web.us.j/89533225776 or call 669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 895-3322-5776. To troubleshoot issues with the connection at the time of this meeting, please follow the link https://support.zoom.us/hc/en-us/sections/200305-593-troubleshooting. If you still experience issues, email customer service at greenmountainwater.org and our IT staff will assist you as soon as possible. The district does not discriminate on the basis of race, age, national origin, color, creed, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or disability in the provision of its services. People with disabilities needing reasonable accommodation to attend or participate in a district board meeting can call 303-985-1581 or email customer service at greenmountainwater.org for assistance. Please give notice as far in advance as possible so we may accommodate your request. So I'm going to move to agenda item number 1, a call to order, declaration of a quorum. Jeff Baker here.
Todd Hooks here. Alex Punching here.
Dave Garner here.
Sharon Woody here.
So all 5 directors are present. We now have a quorum. We're going to move on to agenda item number 2, directors matters, disclosures matters. Are there any directors matters or disclosure matters?
No.
Nope. Okay. We'll close out agenda item number 2, move on to agenda item number 3, approval of additions to and deletions from the agenda. Anything?
No.
Okay, we will close out agenda item number 3 and move on to agenda item number 4. Public comment, limit 5 minutes per person. Per past motion of the Green Mountain Water and Sanitation Board of Directors, May 11th, 2021, members of the public wishing to address the board during the public comment period are asked to keep the comments civil and related to the items in the agenda or to the conduct of the district business. Members of the public wishing to address the board will be recognized by the board to maintain proper decorum. Since the Green Mountain Water and Sanitation District Board values your input, we always offer additional opportunities for the public to provide comments by using the district's email system or by phoning into customer service in the event you do not get on during the meeting during the period set aside for the public comment. So I will open up public comment. Do we have anybody in the room? Nobody in the room. Do we have anybody online that would wish to speak?
I do. I'm online. I can't find the hand raise symbol. This is Amara.
Hi, Amara. You're up.
Thanks, Jeff. I have 2 comments tonight. The first one is, obviously, this is a special meeting to discuss tap fees. And having had the pleasure to be part of those discussions since 2018, I would like to respectfully ask the board that when you are looking at tap fees tonight, you strongly reconsider the past pattern. As you know, there was a long period of time when the tap fee was not raised and it was undervalued relative to the water scarcity and the revised projections for water availability in this area in the future. And you guys wisely took a somewhat token tap fee increase. I think it was last year, the year before. But my point tonight is we really need to address reality. And when you look at tap fees or adding more stress onto our water system, I urge you to please consider the limited water resource in this area, the 22-year drought, the 7-state compact, the restrictions on water that are happening all over the West. We have to have tap fees for new builds and for ADUs, which is a new build, that reflect the value of this water. So I really urge you to consider that when you price this commodity via the tap fees. It will not affect water rates of existing residents or citizens in the district. It's just the new tap fees. And I think it's a critical issue. And I thank you for considering that. My second point is, we learned in the Marshall Fire that in this urban suburban wildlife interface, such as where we live, we can run out of water to put out the fire. I never even thought of that. I don't think many of us imagined that would be an aspect of fighting fires. I would like to ask the board, and perhaps this could be the first assignment of our new district manager, to please publish on the website what our emergency procedure is within staff. In Longmont, the district manager was on the ground. These were the water department staff and technicians were the unsung heroes of the Marshall Fire. They were running around trying to give access of the water resource to the fire department. And the district manager in one municipality had to make the tough decision when they ran out of water to run raw sewage. I hadn't even thought of this. And I would like Green Mountain Water and Sanitation District to publish what their emergency procedure is in the event of the same thing happening out here in our district, which is no different than the Marshall area and very susceptible. We all know about the recent Bear Creek evacuations that happened last year. So I just ask that you consider a review of what your emergency procedure is, what your phone tree is, what the process is, and also to publish on your website for the citizens what that procedure is going to be in place. The fire department has spoken on this. I've actually spoken with some folks in West Metro, and they said they're happy to work with, but haven't yet worked with you on coordinating a plan. Thank you very much.
So can I respond to Amara? Don't just cover a couple things.
Yeah.
So Amara, a couple things under the issue of water. You know, our water is a Denver water resource, and we're a pass-through district. And we appreciate and we're very cognizant and sensitive to what's going on with the water. This board's very sensitive to what's happening here in Colorado. The point of what we're trying to do with Raptelis, or in our own way, is understand the exact cost and what things increase annually. The nuts and bolts of our infrastructure, the operating system, the actual operating system, which is ours, and then reflect. You know, it's a commodity, it's a resource. So we want the tap fees to reflect that. So that's what we're trying to work towards. I don't know if the actual water could be a component of the algorithm, but you know, we're going to be looking at all that tonight. And then to circle out to your second question about the Marshall Fire, Director Plotkin's been all over this, and we did discuss part of this at the last board meeting. And the staff had mentioned about the abilities to open up mains for additional flow where we don't need, first off, I don't think we have any sewage holding tanks other than the lift stations over the other side of the hill here. So we don't have any storage of sewage water that we could use for that purpose. But we do have the ability to open up connectors from the different zones to meet the requirements of water, and we are still looking into that. That's not a dead subject. We have been addressing it, and we will get some published. So appreciate your input and your thoughts. Do you have any questions for the board on any of this?
No, thank you, Jeff. That's just, I just wanted to let you know, there's a lot of us out here that support you guys pricing the tap fees that reflect the situation and creating an on the ground emergency situation for the fire. So thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for participating tonight.
And I was at the last meeting, but I wasn't able to comment. So I did hear that discussion about some of it. So thank you.
All right. Do we have any other members of the public wishing to speak? Going once, going twice, gone. We're going to close agenda item number 4 and go to agenda item number 5, the Reptelis rate study presentation. Floor is yours.
Come, let me move over. You can stay over here. And listen.
Do we have a presentation we can put online or something?
Yeah, you got that right there.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
this one, is there any other?
There were PDFs.
I've got the other one. Right here, just.
I don't even want to get around that. Okay, I guess I have you advance forms.
Right.
And I think.
It's highly technical.
Yeah. Want to go back to view foils, remember that? Good evening. Good evening. My name is Todd Christian with Reptelis and Bobby Tech with Reptelis as well. It's been a pleasure working with Kristen doing this study over the past couple of months. Some of you might remember I was back here in September of 2020, I believe, giving a SDC 101. We had a lively conversation about the ins and outs and mechanics of system development charges. And so we were awarded this study back in November, and working with the previous district manager kind of got that started, and that's when Kristen came on board. And so tonight's discussion is really our preliminary results of our findings. And our role in this project is we are financial consultants. Reptelis does this nationwide. I work with a number of districts here around the area, Crestview, Bancroft, Clover, Lakewood, a number of Denver Water distributed districts, and going through similar studies. The goal tonight is to kind of show our findings, and from our perspective, give you an idea of how we think your financial health is, just based on our experience working with other districts and other communities this size. So next slide. So today we're talking about system development fees, give you a little background on the definitions and the methodologies and approaches, the one we selected and the findings. And then the financial plan, we'll talk about the methodology and how we put this together. It's a really unique financial planning approach, just the way the district handles and monitors and manages costs and revenues. So we'll go into a little bit of detail on that, and then our findings. So next slide. From a financial perspective, when we look at the district's financial health compared to other districts around the area, and you look at the TAP fees, where they are from a mechanical, mathematical point of view in the financial plan, the district's in good health. You've done a lot of made a lot of sound decisions. When you look at the balances, what you're recovering now from TAP fees on paper, you're in a great position today to move forward for the next 10 years. So anyway, back to system development fees. For those of you not too aware about system development fees, here's some criteria. They're a one-time charge, obviously. They're for new customer demand, or if you have some incremental demand, if you have a customer who comes in and say a brewery comes in and buys an old gas station with a 3/4 inch tap and they need to increase it to a 1 inch, you might get charged an incremental tap fee. It's required of all new customers to buy in for their share of capacity. Some long time ago, somebody has helped build the system and provide additional capacity for new people to buy into, and that's what they're doing. They're kind of buying into their fair share of capacity. Obviously, the increase in capacity for existing customers should they need it. And the basic calculation is based on the value of the system, of all the assets, infrastructure assets, divided by the capacity that can be served. And we'll talk about what numbers we use for the numerator and what numbers we use for the denominator, which is the capacity. Next slide. They can be used for debt service. You don't have any debt service, so that's not an issue. The whole idea in theory is that by having system development charges is that you kind of balance the equity between new and existing customers. Existing customers have been here. You're building something new over here. I'm an existing customer. I don't want to pay for that new stuff over there. That's growth. I mean, they're causing that. We want to pay for that. That's not necessarily the case with all utilities. Some utilities don't have tap fees, and existing customers pay for growth, or tax dollars pay for growth. So, but that's with system development fees, just in general, the equity between existing and new customers. And when we look at, well, what are we trying to recover here? It's backbone facilities, transmission mains, pump stations, storage, wastewater treatment plant, if you have it, force mains, those large backbone facilities, but also those other related items that you need to support the backbone system. Next slide, please. Some best practices here is that we want to make sure we're compliant with state statutes. Raf Tellis and myself included, and Bobby, I believe, we're not attorneys, but when we look at the statute, there's some basic concepts that we want to make sure we design our fees around. One of them, for example, is that you cannot include assets that are less than 5 years. Pretty simple. You look at the asset list and you try to find those assets that are less than 5 years old, like the old VHS player that's still sitting on the asset listing. You don't want to include that. In terms of, and I have seen that. I've seen the old VHS player being capitalized. I'm not sure why, but in replacement cost new is worth about $30,000 or something. So you want to make sure that the fees are assessed in proportion to impact. I mean, there's a rational nexus, there's a reasonable relationship. You can't use it to fund repairs. I mean, you can't collect a tap fee and go out and pay operations and maintenance cost or repair a main. The idea is they're buying into the capacity of the system. We want to exclude contributed assets, and we've done that here. There's a number of contributed assets identified in the asset listing as contributed. So since they're contributed, they're free capital. So we don't want to get a return on those through the tap fees. And the 5-year service life. Okay, next slide. There was one other point I wanted to make on that, and as soon as I think about it, I'll come back to it. Basic calculation, like I mentioned, you've got the value of facilities divided by the system capacity or the number of customers served. You get a unit cost, and that can be used to assess your tap fee. Okay, and I'll show the methodology we use to calculate the tap fees for the district. Okay, next slide. Okay, so there's 3 basic methodologies, and there's buy-in, which means you're buying into an existing system. If you think about joining a health club, usually you pay an initiation fee. You're buying into that system, gives you access to all of the clubs, but then you pay monthly dues, which helps keep the treadmill working and that sort of thing. So you're buying into an existing system. That's what this methodology is. Incremental means we have no more capacity left to serve new customers. If someone showed up here tomorrow, we could not serve them in theory. We need to build some new facilities and look forward to all the expansion we're adding. Hybrid's a combination of both, meaning you've got a little bit of capacity, but you're really got some growth coming online, and you need to recover those costs. But for the district, we looked at buy-in. You are adding some new taps, but you're not looking to do major expansions in the future, new line extensions or upsizing mains and that sort of thing. So we're using the buy-in, and again, capacity available for the customer to buy into. And for the buy-in methodology, we typically value that at replacement cost new, the assets at replacement cost new, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. Next slide. So we have the buy-in methodology. That was the one we were focusing in on, and there's some different valuation alternatives. And we're with replacement cost new, replacement cost less accumulated depreciation, which, yes, is a mouthful. Under replacement cost new, we are trying to recover the cost of existing facilities as if they were put in today. What would be the cost to put the facilities in today? Now, we are working off historical assets, meaning we are looking at the detailed accounting assets, the year they were installed, the service life, the accounting life that they were installed, the original cost, and Then we were able to scale those up using an index similar to the CPI. What we use is called the GMWSD Record Index, which is a construction materials and construction index that's widely used with system development charges. It is a general index. There are other ones that are more specific. One's called the Handy-Whitman Index. Traditionally, is the presentation that bad? Traditionally, Handy-Whitman Index might give you a little higher fee, but it just varies. It depends. So those are two. There's another way to do replacement costs, and that is to go out and do a replacement cost study. You hire a firm to come in, they look at all your pump stations, and they go out and calculate, okay, based on engineering estimates, here's how much it would cost. They look at everything and do that. And we did that to an extent with our analysis. There's replacement cost less accumulated depreciation. Let me back up to replacement cost new. So what we're basically saying is that new customer, you're buying into this system at replacement cost new. We're not concerned about the age of the facilities or anything like that, but you're buying into this cost, you're buying into this new. And what's happening with this methodology is that you're paying today's prices based on today's values. You're buying into a system that has been put in over the years, and the existing customers have helped maintain this level of service over years to maintain a great level of service for these new customers to tie into. So when you look at this replacement cost new in today's dollars, although the facility was put in 20, 30 years ago, the existing customers are kind of getting a little bit of a return for them spending their money over time to maintain this capacity and make the investment in the system. So you're getting a little bit of a return. The replacement cost new less accumulated depreciation, same concept. The biggest difference here is that we've taken into account the life of the facility and where it is in its life today, recognizing that, hey, this pump station is not brand new. It's got some, scrapes and bruises on it. It's working great. It's meeting the level of service. It's meeting the requirements it needs to serve the customers. But we also recognize that it's not new and it does have a shortened service life. And so we looked at them both ways. We'll look at the calculations of what that gives us. But it also does give you a little bit of return because, again, we're valuing those assets at today's cost versus when they were put in. So replacement cost new, replacement cost less accumulated depreciation. Next slide. Okay, so here's the calculation here, and I'll kind of walk through here what we've got. We're using the buy-in methodology, and you can see the word up there. It says equity buy-in, and by equity buy-in, it means that tells us what type of denominator we are using. There's two different types of denominators you can use. One is the capacity of the system. How many SFREs can you possibly fit on the system? That's the capacity. Here we're looking at equity buy-in methodology, and we're looking at this way because when we've done studies with other communities like the district in similar situations to the district, the equity buy-in method looks at the current number of SFREs. And the concept behind the equity buy-in is that every new person that comes in has kind of an equal share in the value of the system. So as you keep on adding people, you buy into that share. And unfortunately, I cannot read that number. So I'm somewhat visually impaired here. So when we look at the two options, replacement cost new and replacement cost less accumulated depreciation, replacement cost new, we're coming up with 6730 for the water equity buy-in, slightly higher than their 644. So what that's telling me is that the district's current tap fee, although it's not been evaluated, I guess, level of detail, that it's kept up, the way it's been increased has kept up with what we are calculating over time. So in a sense, you've been recovering costs. Now, what we say is this is the maximum supportable. If we were to look at this methodology here, replacement cost new, this is the maximum supportable. And what that means is that the board could adopt up to 6730, and we'd have the documentation, pieces of paper, and the methodologies to support that should that be challenged. You're also free to adopt anything up to that. Adopt 6,086, adopt 0. That's obviously at the board's discretion. Replacement cost new less accumulated depreciation obviously comes in a little bit lower. And again, this is also recognizing the fact that assets have depreciated. We're not buying into new new assets. So the way I look at this is kind of the bookends of your of where your tap fees can be. And it's a matter of, well, the 3350, how much do we want to place the burden on existing ratepayers, and or with 6730, we're asking the development community to pay into the system at today's value and provide that return to existing customers because they have spent their initial SDC plus all of their dollars in maintaining the system over time. So those are kind of the two questions that come up when looking between the both. That's why I'm going to provide both options here. So what's the philosophy the board would want to adopt when looking at both of these? So 6730 for the replacement cost new, it's an increase of $644, or the replacement cost new less accumulated depreciation. And that's on water. So let's go to wastewater real quick, next slide. Okay, wastewater replacement cost new. It's a little bit lower than what you have right now. And with the replacement cost new less accumulated depreciation, it's a bit. Again, I want to emphasize that we relied on the asset listing, the number of existing SFRs you have. The fact that the replacement cost new in both the water and wastewater are within that range makes sense. And there was a court case, Krebs v. Breckenridge, that the court had said, and I'm not indicating that we're not calculating correctly, but we have to bear the reasonable relationship between the benefit they receive and the cost they pay. Reasonable relationship, rational nexus doesn't mean that mathematical exactitude is required. We're not trying to get down to the nearest penny of exactness. As long as what we can demonstrate with our study is the reasonable relationship between what they're paying and what they're getting. And we've done that here with going through the asset listing, assigning the replacement, assigning the ENR index, very common approach, looking at the number of existing connections you have and going through that methodology and going through this standard practice, considering, we didn't come up with these two options on water and wastewater overnight. Kristen, Bobby, and I worked at this for a number of weeks, having a lot of discussions about what are the things that we need to consider in here. And so we were kind of, at first you're kind of all over the map, and you start whittling it down once you get more and more detail. This is where we landed. So this was not the first and final answer out of the chute. This was something that took a bit of deliberation. So next slide. And so here's a comparison of what those fees will look like once you add in the SFREs by meter size for water and wastewater, but obviously it scales at the same level you're at now. So with that brief overview of the system development, I'll pause and see if there's any questions or whether there's some more detail I need to go over in those areas.
So question, my
Sure.
first question, I have a number of them. Says if it's a system development fee, it may not be used to fund repairs. So we have, say, new development that comes in and it overloads our system and it causes our current mains to fail or become damaged. Why are we not allowed to use that money to fix that?
So what the ordinance statute says.
So when you say ordinance statute, this is a state law
Yeah.
or what is it?
It's a state statute. Statute 2920-104-5. I think it's on slide 5. There's a provision in there that it's not meant to use to fund repairs, meaning you're not asking customers to pay a tap fee so you can go repair a main. Now, upsizing the main, if you had to upsize the main, then if
Well,
new
that was my
development,
next question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, if you need more capacity and the development drives it, I mean, I would certainly want them to pay to upsize the main. I
Mhm.
would not want to eat that or expect the existing customers to pay that.
one scenario is if you have let's just make it simple, you have a new neighborhood in town.
Right.
And it's a new area, and there's the system that's able to handle those flows, but there's a main up there that for that development,
Mhm.
the line needs to be upsized. Then you might have your regular system loan fee, which kind of covers the backbone system of the main part, but there also might be an incremental tap system development fee just for that area because you're having to upsize that main for that development. It doesn't benefit anybody else but that development. So you could have a combination of the system development fee, which covers the backbone system, but then there's the a participation fee, as Denver Water calls it, for upsizing a particular part of the system that is going to benefit just that area.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, Todd.
No,
So in the
please.
past, we had a phone call with Denver Water and they essentially said the board has, not per se leeway, but some degree of freedom to set additional fees if there's a need to upsize, a particular extension of the system just to serve that neighborhood
Yes.
essentially.
That's true.
So that's my understanding,
Yes.
right?
That is true.
Because in the past, we've had, well, I would think questionable, approaches to such things where there were refunds and whatnots back to the development for reasons I couldn't understand.
Yeah, and that gets tricky with line extensions and developers pay, but they get paid back over time, either through the district or through the new connectors coming on. We have a number of those, and it gets just really tricky over time because the developer getting reimbursed might run out of money or something. And but those type of agreements are used in those situations where you're doing a line extension or main extension. If you hadn't planned on providing service out there, but as a developer who wants to build homes up there, they can build it and reimburse the district, or there's a number of ways to do it, but it does complicate the issue.
Because we're in this weird situation of where I don't want to flat out say some people are wanting to use the district to subsidize development, but I don't know what other words to use. But for example, there's certain trunk lines in the district that we were shown by the capacity plan to be essentially red. And there are still people kind of pining to put things at the end of those red trunk lines. So what are we to do, I guess, in such a situation?
Again, I'm no longer an engineer, but if you're at capacity of certain facilities and you also need to build new lines, you have to upsize that red area.
Yep.
That might be an incremental cost to that development, plus whatever additional lines you have to build to get to that development area. Plus, they would pay just the backbone facility because they have to buy into the system. So you'd have to look at them on a case-by-case basis and, peak flows and all that sort of thing. But way we would look at, if you were to ask us to do that, we would parse it out and say, well, these lines of capacity, they want to come in, we need to upsize the line just for them. And we need to also extend it just for them, and no one else is going to receive benefit off this. Then, that way you have your denominator of how many customers would you served off that and the cost, and you would do something like that. But you'd have to just parse it out and do individual calculations for it.
But there is a basis and there is some legal basis, Dylan, that will be supported, right, as an additional fee on top of the SDA.
From a practitioner standpoint, we have done that, yes.
Okay.
And if Denver Water has done that, then there's obviously precedent set there. I think there are actually some participation agreements with Denver Water for some neighborhoods up here that there was a incremental system development fee for certain neighborhoods for a pump station or something up in this area years ago when I worked there. And I'm not sure whether they're still a player, but they had some individual, they call them participation.
So the partition, no. So the participation fees, do those go to Denver Water or do they go to us?
That's a good question. So if you are adding taps, you have, as I understand it, if you are adding taps to the system, Denver Water is going to charge you for each one of the taps based on their calculation. You're going to charge for the backbone facilities of those taps as well. So this is notwithstanding any sort of extension or anything like that. So if you add 10 3/4-inch meters, you're going to charge 10 SFREs to that development. Denver Water is going to charge their 10 individual system development charges. On top of that, so you've got the two components there. With line extensions things, I think that is the business of the district. I mean, it's not a new tap. Denver Water's already received the capacity payment through their tap fee, through their backbone facility, the tap fee they're charging on top of yours. Obviously, you need to verify that, but that's, I believe, how that works. Once you pay on a per tap basis, and the water charges on a per tap basis, how you upsize your mains to serve the capacity is district. I would definitely verify that with their rates manager, make sure that's the case.
Is your calculation flexible enough to include wastewater pipes that are, let's say, 80% into their useful life based on moderate use, but with new inflow, it goes to maximum use?
When we were looking at this, we are looking, and that gets to the capacity issue. So let's take an example that if you have a pipe that's 80 years old and maybe at the beginning of its life, it could handle 3 MGD or something. But now it's older and it can only handle 2 MGD. Okay. In theory, one way to look at that is saying, well, replacement cost, new, less accumulated depreciation, but really the capacity is really 2 MGD. That's the capacity. It started out as 3. That's one thing you could look at. I've not had that situation. The closest thing I can think of is when you have a wastewater treatment plant, which at 80%, you have to start designing a new one. So do you divide by 80% of the capacity or you divide by the full capacity of the plant? That's kind of an argument. And again, it's,
You have to serve everybody, so
you have to start,
full
yeah.
capacity would seem the logical choice.
It would be, and I've seen it both ways, and I would tend to agree with you that, because at some point you're going to use that remaining 20% capacity. So again, these types of questions and chin stroking are the same things that Chris and Bobby and I went through thinking, okay, okay, what about this? And from our point of view is that we want to turn over all the stones, make sure we've got all the data, calculate it based on what industry practice and what we've seen, our expertise and what we've seen in the industry, not present something that is wildly, that could be speculative or that kind of, raises a question. We want to be conservative in our numbers. We want to be conservative in our assumptions as well. And that's what we've tried to present here. But all of these questions are certainly something to be taken into consideration when looking at finalizing these fees. If there needs to be a policy in your operating rules about line extensions and oversizing and how that works with the tap fee, those sorts of things.
Just have one other question.
Sure.
It's kind of tangential to this, but kind of pulls it together for me. Has your firm ever been called upon to be, or have you provided expert witnesses for court cases?
We have been called in. My recent boss, who's retired now, he's done a number of, he's did this for 40 years, so he's been involved in a number of, not because of him, but recently there was a court case with South Fort Collins Loveland Water District, and they're also a sanitation district. There was a question as to the value of I believe the SFRE used for multifamily. Is it 1 or is it 0.5? And it came down, they did a lot of analysis and they figured out that what the district had was correct, but he had to testify. We've not had to testify in sort of, I guess, that I'm aware of since I've been in the firm, that we've had to testify defending our work from an error. We've had to defend, I'm sure we've had to defend clients when they've implemented something and we come to become an expert witness on something.
Let me ask you, so you talked about something being wildly speculative. Define that. What are you talking about? Because that's a pretty big word.
I would say that we calculate the fees based on the best information we have available and make reasonable assumptions. For example, we're not going to just guess. We think the value of the system is $20 million. That sounds good, right? Let's just use that. We want to back it up by some sort of data, some sort of assumption, or some sort of industry best practice. We don't want to have just numbers that are out there. For example, when we were looking at the number of current SFREs, Bobby and I were looking at it, and we had 2 different values for it. I was like, well, something's wrong here. We got to find out. Now, we could have just said, well, we think it's this one. We'll just use this one. And the fees have been wildly different, but we confirmed with the district, hey, let's just make sure this is correct because something doesn't seem right. So that's kind of what I mean by speculative of just making broad assumptions about, well, this would be applicable here. Let's at least try to find some support behind that from data.
So this is how I'm looking at it. So we sell a service here, right? I mean, that's what we sell.
Right.
It's a commodity. And as your commodity becomes less available, like any other commodity, the price should go up. because of supply and demand. That's one. Two, it's based on a service which should be reflective of inflationary factors,
Correct.
real inflationary factors. And the third thing that concerns me with a lot of what's going on with water and wastewater departments, or how people perceive this, is the metro district abuse levels that have been, you're seeing them everywhere, where people are having issues and they're not keeping up, where Westminster or Laura, they're having these issues where, like similar to us, where we had a firm come in and tell us we need $100 million for capitalization, right? Well, as you have people buying into it, and that number, I don't know if we ever got a real number, but it came way down. So where I'm going with this is the wildly speculative side seems to not be in this room. It seems to be the pressure that's put on this
We've
room.
had people tell us we need coolization tanks, and now we didn't.
Right. I'm just trying to tell you, I think there are things, you're always playing from behind as a water and sanitation district, and not understanding the impacts of what present and the future does to the district. And then as you allow this to occur, and then you have to actualize that with the stakeholders, existing stakeholders, this is where the problem is becoming. And I am super sensitive to this now. And I know Amara's on the line. She's usually pretty good about sitting in on these meetings. She's one of our stakeholders in this, but that's pretty common amongst all these people. They're not happy with the discounted rates for what they know the value of what this district is worth. And then the impact based on what we've seen on the Front Range of what it does to water and sanitation. Oh, we got to run a bond issue. We got to do this or that. Well, I don't think it was because the district wasn't running itself well. I mean, how did they get upside down? And it's because I don't think they're not enough forward thinking going on to account for that in the present terms of the commodity they're selling. And I'm really going to be stickler on this thing here. That I mean, we're trying to get this algorithm to understand this, but that's the position I'm coming from.
We've been constantly poked by this stick of, suppose the lake was 96% built out or whatever we've been told, and so don't worry about it. Which in reality on the ground doesn't seem to be the case, because when we spoke to Denver Water, they said, well, now everybody's building up. Now Denver Water probably knows what the hell they're talking about, I would hope. So if everybody's building up, sky is literally the limit. So
It's not only building up, but like the constituent Mara had mentioned, the ADUs, you have these potential accessory dwelling units. The concept of what greenfield or build out will be in the future is going to change, and it's changing rapidly. It's no longer going to be 40 greenfield acres. It could be over there on Colfax where it's all been blighted, and then it's like it builds up, and the compression of density is changing. The zoning laws keep changing, and so that's what we have to be very sensitive. I don't want to trigger something going on in this district that we're just at a discounted rate, and then 10 years from now, based on the development that's occurring, now all of a sudden we're looking at a $40 million expenditure to bring the capitalize these projects to get everything up to speed for that. And I don't think we account for that. I know we try, but I think we need to do better for that.
And the reason why I asked some of the questions I asked in the email is in 2016, I was literally standing on our back porch, and we were about to be told to evacuate or not, because we were watching the Green Mountain burn. And luckily then we did not have the wind conditions that just happened in December. And everything I've seen, at least from our municipality since, hasn't given me any confidence that should another event like that take place, that the citizens will be protected and taken care of. And then more than ever, we just did the capacity study, and we were, examining the pressure at all the endpoints of the system, specifically the fire hydrants. And some of them are in question. And then the event in December happened. And yes, as the constituent stated, there's a number of articles, they literally ran out of water. And so again, that's what kind of led to some of my questions of how do we price that in? Now, I understand that we're not supposed to use the SDFs to, cover up with the mistakes of the past. However, going forward, situation has drastically changed on a number of levels. Colorado River is dying. Superior and Louisville just happened literally barely a month and a half ago. Again, how do we price all of those things in? Because we're not getting a whole lot of help or guidance from anybody else around here. But we have a fiduciary duty to our constituents to, if shit should really hit the fan, where's the water gonna come from? How do we price that in?
On a day-to-day basis, we have to think about, we are somewhere, hopefully toward the end of the 1,500-year drought. Or west. I mean, or
Or
we're in the beginning of it. We just don't know. We don't have any historical data to look back that far. There weren't any geologists being, produced in France or Germany. We're doing those studies. So what we look at is at what point do we honestly say to the district residents, we have to begin thinking about when we turn off your water. So you better xeriscape today, because there just isn't going to be any water for you to do what you have been doing for decades in the district. It just isn't going to be there. So every time we mention development, we ought to mention restrictions on water use, because they ought to be part of the same conversation always. You guys do brilliant work. I mean, it's really quite amazing. And your thoughtfulness of thinking about small things that affect things is pretty rare. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I hear this a lot, that we're playing catch up. When we look at rates, we based off average cost pricing, and there's always an argument with economists that we should be charging marginal cost and things. But from a standpoint of, well, you have a budget, A divided by B, that's your average cost. And if your repair and replacement program is up to date, then you are kind of recovering the marginal cost, because you are funding the system. I want to pause real quick. When we talk about funding things, our SDFs, we have included a balance that part of your fund balance of around $20 million. We've incorporated that into the calculation of the fee. And what that's telling us is saying that $20 million, or a portion of that $20 million, that's going to be used to build new assets, repair new assets, and keep the system ready to keep buying in. So I think it kind of touches on what you're saying, but there's a lot of other externalities out there that from a mathematical standpoint might be difficult for us to put in.
Well, you understand the mathematics of that. So, we've been, we have a plan that, we put out so much every year for the capital that's keeping up with it. But, like I said, you're still playing from behind. As this accelerates, the growth accelerates, the level, that's going to change the level of the capitalization. That's not triggered by the existing capacity or the people here. That's the missing variable.
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but no, I'm just saying that I'm super sensitive to this, because look, I've been in facilities my whole life, and it's like I've seen how this goes. You're always underwater with this stuff. When I say playing from behind, it is a real thing. And what that does to your business when you play from behind, how are you ever going to recover that cost? You only have two ways of doing that: raise the rates, right? Or you have to look at these sources. The money streams. How are you going to manage this?
Right.
And if we're talking about the capitalization or as a commodity of this district, it is a commodity, and it's like it should reflect that.
Well, and the other thing is, from a business perspective, is, it's interesting because if you go ask anybody, what has the rent done around the metro area, or for example, I was looking at doing some remodeling, and I remember 2x4s being $350. Well, crap, they're $7 now. That's literally doubling in 2 years. So
Yeah, you can't get copper.
So to Jeff's point, we are playing from behind, and there is now, on top of that, you said the magic word, externalities, that haven't even really been accounting for, as far as these environmental shocks now, these wind events or anything. To be honest, US infrastructure is a joke. And so there is a lot of concern with how do we not suffer what Superior and Louisville have just suffered. And again, it's interesting that their water district people have done. They went above and beyond during that event, but where were the people, you know, the other people that triggered certain events such as, you know, certain development patterns or what have you, and, you know, left the residents and the water district people to deal with those events.
The forensics of what happened will take 10 years for them to reveal that. That's what I'm talking about. They will come back 10 years from now and they will give you the forensic findings of what happened on the Marshall Fire. In the meantime, we've just moved 10 years into the future here. And what are we doing to ourselves? We already know something happened, that there, you know, there's different factors to all that. But what part of that do we own? And what part of that do we need to be accounting for right now? And not waiting. I don't want to sit on my thumbs. I'm too old for that. I'll be dead in 10 years. You know, the thing is, you know, we really need to be sensitive to this. And, you know, that's my point. It's,
So within the law, they allow, I mean, does it completely clamp down on how these prices, I mean, does the law need to be changed? I mean, what needs to make it so that it is more forward thinking as opposed to past thinking?
It's depending on the methodology that the consultant or what the organization would pick. I was just going to get to your point of looking forward. You'd still maybe be behind in a sense, but I looked at the previous consultants' asset management plan and their water system upgrades. And when you talk about fire line or lines not being sized well for meeting fire hydrants, that's obviously the efficiency. You want to take care of that in rates. But if you had a master plan completed of saying what's Green Mountain going to look like in 10 years, and they project that you're going to have all these buildings going up, higher density, you're going to need extensions and that sort of thing. From a calculation, from a methodology standpoint, we say, hey, well, wait a minute. Maybe we need to be looking at this hybrid or incremental. You've pretty much got everything taken care of over here, but on Colfax, you're building up. We're going to have to upsize a lot of mains, build some extensions to meet that demand. Then you would have this part of the calculation called the incremental or forward-looking that you would start collecting on that type of development coming into play. Now, you kind of have to build it first before they all come in. That's the challenge. So if you have 90 new apartment complexes come in with 100 units each, if you have cash on hand, you can pay for the upsizing right off the bat. Many utilities will use debt and make an assumption that there's going to be recurring taps coming in with growth and things like that to help pay off that debt, to help maintain a stable cash flow over time. But one way to get ahead of that is if you were to have a master plan to find, well, really, what kind of growth? You're not going to greenfield, but is there going to be building up growth? And is that going to change your system? And then if that's the case, and you have projects lined out, then certainly we would come back and maybe look at the hybrid methodology or even just an incremental. And that would put you ahead of the game in the sense that we're starting to recover tap fee money on this future expansion that we need to have to start building and have ready for residents while still keeping it off the backs of existing customers. That would be another, and I'm sorry, again, talking from the theory perspective, there's obviously policy and political perspective and things that we can't include in this.
why?
Well, we did our duty is to really calculate the fees based on the hard data that we have. Now, and our role is to provide this information for which I guess the board and our organizations to make policy decisions. That's what we're providing to you. We're not the policy decision makers or anything like that. We did, you know, when we talked with Kristen, we looked at the different methodologies and said, well, let's show these two. To me, just showing one methodology would be not providing options to the board and kind of putting you in a corner of like, well, what do we do? At least we provided two here, some bookends, and there might be some work in between.
But we should have the flexibility to be flexible with what you present. Look, I understand you guys have to substantiate things.
Yes.
Based on what you know, what's out there, right? But there's also, I'm not going to discount what I've learned here for 4 years and not think that it's not real. It's just, we haven't come up with some number, you know, there's no factor for it. I just know it's real. And I know I need to find a way to start enacting that. And that is going to be, and this is a legislative body. And I know we have a level of flexibility And I'm gonna push that right to the nth degree. Any way I can. And it's not because, like I said, we're not here to make money, but I am here to protect the existing stakeholders. I guarantee you that. And that's the only way I know how to do that. I mean, I'm not even sure that's gonna be enough, to be honest.
And we
But
just want to,
it's the least we can do.
and we want to provide the foundation, a starting point for you to be able to have those discussions, like, this is what the consultants calculated. Where do we need to go from this board? Do we need to bring the consultant back in and have them look at how do we maybe price some of these externalities and hard numbers and that sort of thing? Or if it's something that the board wants to do some internal research on, but we want to provide just a foundation from the methodology and how we view SDCs in our side of the table. I think it gives you a good starting point of saying, where do we need to go from here? And try a number of options, like you mentioned, and some we could possibly help out with, some are more.
Well, one of the problems, and I like what you're saying, but the problem with us doing nothing and waiting is this district, it's money leaving, it's leaving us. That's not, however this development stuff's gonna go, that's money you'll never recuperate. And, just like what we experienced this last year where we lost time, we should have been more on top of this, and we wanted to be. I'm just saying it's got to be for director level. This is going to be a huge priority for us.
And, I'm not trying to upsell or anything like that, but there are things that we could do in terms of what do other communities do to address the very issues that you're bringing up? Because you're probably not the only person.
I've talked with some others, but examples like Alex, I remember we were right in the middle of talking about this. I remember somewhere up in Westminster, and look, there's people. I'm kind of bouncing all over. Metro districts are a huge problem on the Front Range. I'm hearing it from different people politically, people that live in these districts. Like when you look at Aurora, and it's like, we'll never pay this off. We're never going to pay off this thing. You've got people in this area that have been here for a long time. I grew up here. I've pretty much been here most of my life. And it's like, I don't think it's always fair that just because somebody now wants to come in and it flips your world upside down. And it does that, just by nature of change. I get that things are always going to change. But I think that the impact of change, people should bear their responsibilities for their impact they bring to the indigenous people.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just come in and just run ramshot and you create the problem like in Westminster. What was that on that main where they backed up? They kept building, they kept adding, they kept building, and they backed up their sewers everywhere. Now, what does that do for our district? I mean, it's not like you get hey, Sam, let's get 2 crews out there and get this done by Saturday. You're talking about a massive capitalization. Now, how do you go in front of your constituents and say, I need $60 million to do this? Well, how did you guys get there? Well, we weren't really paying attention and we thought this and that. And it's like, that's not an acceptable mindset anymore.
One thing that when we look at repair, as you continue to improve the system, that does go into your asset base. And this, I'm talking about the nerdy calculation of one, but as you continue to invest in the system, the value of the system continues to go up. So that helps you get up to speed, or maybe not ahead, but it's that balance there. So, but you're right. This is what makes system development fees challenging, is that it's cost you're trying to recover over time, and the climate, not just the physical climate, changes over time in terms of growth, where you're growing, where there might be bottlenecks in the system, that sort of thing. Unlike rates, which is pretty much A divided by B gets your rate, and that's how much you need to recover from your SDCs, are just a little more challenging because it's a time-based series, and that at the end of the day, when everything's built out 100%, you should have recovered the cost to serve new development. You should recover the cost of your system at build, and that's the theory at build out. But I've only known one utility that's tried to map that, and they were somewhat successful, I guess. So, but anyway, those are.
I'd rather have the government tell me you can't do that and you've gone too far, than to have the constituents chime in on, public comment and saying, what were you guys doing?
Well, That's a good lead in for the financial plan part of this. And maybe provide some more perspective on the system development fees, but yeah, I'm hearing similar challenges from communities I mentioned. Crestview, for example, Crestview has a number of new growth, a lot of new growth. They're able to use their existing system to fit that growth, but at some point they might have to install some new infrastructure to meet growth just for that area. So they might be running into very similar problems that this district is. Lakewood, when I spoke with Vince, they had a new main they wanted to put in or something to provide service to some new apartment sewer line or something like that. So they were seeing expansion in they have a very small service area, but those things to be mindful of, and a master plan looking forward, trying to estimate what's going to be happening. That would further enhance your cost recovery of the system development charge, because we have an accurate picture, more accurate picture of the future, and know how do we need to start charging for that today. And give us a background, give us some substantiation of all of that data.
So question, does our current capitalization and lack of debt affect what we supposedly charge?
Yes. On the system development charges and system development fees, the common practice is that if you have a system and you had issued debt for half of it, well, and let's say you've issued debt for the whole system, right?
Right.
And you've paid off half. Well, you own 50% of it, the bank owns the rest. So what we would do in that instance is take the value of your system, subtract off the remaining principal, because you don't really own that value of the system, and you have a reduced fee. Now there's some caveats to that, but the theory is that when you credit off that principal, you have a lower SDC, and and then as that new development comes online as existing ratepayer, they're paying through rates, so they're not paying twice, because the debt is being paid for through user charges. Now, how you decide to fund the debt, whether it's from SDCs or user charges, that changes the formula. But yes, debt can influence the calculation, influence the result.
Okay, so in that case, you could use the SDFs to fund, to pay off the debt?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So you could use the SDFs in that situation
So-
to pay off the debt, or is that?
So in high growth communities, and I'll use maybe the town of Erie as an example, they're obviously growing significantly. And in order to have people come in, they've had to build a lot of facilities at that time, so they've taken out a lot of debt. So I believe, if I remember correctly, it was about a year and a half ago, when we looked at calculating the fees, we had the value of their future facilities. We included the cost of the debt, the carrying cost, the interest associated with issuing that debt to pay for those future facilities. We add that cost in. Now, that's kind of opposite of what I've told you about being a buy-in system. So with adding in the carrying cost into the system development charge, you have an SDC that you're recovering the carrying cost per SFE, per new development. That is used to pay off the growth-weighted capital and the growth-weighted debt. Whereas in my example I just gave you, the ratepayers are paying for that principal and interest. That's why we're crediting off the principal. So development, but it's two different people paying the bill, right? The developer versus the user.
So that, using Erie as an example, so their future development, how was that established?
Probably through debt.
Well, no, but
Yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is, like, did they know that developers have put in to build, I'll just make this up, 5,000 homes, 10,000 homes, and so they're doing that? Or, I mean, is that from known things, or did they project that?
It's probably a combination of both. We worked off of the master plan. When I did the study for them back in 2003, they also had a master plan of they're adding 600 units a year, I believe 300 to 600 units a year. They've updated that master plan. They update that regularly because they're just growing so quickly. So yeah, I mean, back in 2003 when we did the study, town of Erie was very small. They've exploded in size, and a lot of those communities along the front range like that. But yeah, they use master plans, and when we would do a system development fee, we'd say, great, you're having explosive growth, where's your master plan? we want to use those numbers as the basis for calculating the fee.
So is that something like, say we went to the city of Lakewood and we asked them to provide us the growth? Why are you laughing, Jeff?
That like makes sense too. Yeah.
That's an interesting approach.
I mean, if we went to the city of Lakewood and said, hey, what's the past? What's the, what do you see? Because we need it for our water. I mean, are cities compelled to do that? Do they not need to do that?
Some
Do they-
cities do that. It just depends on the policy decision, political makeup, and are they being forward thinking to saying that they need to do a master plan? Not all communities we work for do master plans. The last, looking at, I don't know if you were involved, but there was one community, the last master plan was done in 2005. We still looked at it as a basis to see, well, how have they come since 2005? Is there anything we can glean from here? But whether a city or a town decides to do a master plan, I'm sure there's a number of elements there, but when we do a study, that's usually the first thing we ask for. It makes our life a lot easier, right? Let's try to guess, well, you're gonna add a bunch of apartments on Colfax, let's charge this.
So why I bit my tongue off is Lakewood's big thing is being sustainable, but the last thing they want to do is actually understand what it needs to be sustainable. Which, yeah, everybody should have a really precise master plan, because you can only fit so many rocks in that box, right? That's not sustainable. That's what's happening. That's what's wrong here. That's how we have to figure this out and be better at what we're doing, because I don't think we're doing a good job collectively. And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but that's not happening. And we have to get better. We have to come up with new ways to account for this if we're going to be sustainable at all. Because this is, like I said, you're playing from behind, and commodities like water's becoming scarcer and everything's becoming more dense. You're just building in huge problems. And when you bake in problems into infrastructure, it affects everybody. And it'll be a negative way. It's going to be financial, quality of life, you name it, environmental. It's not sustainable.
Seem like, well, and for me, from my perspective, like say with development, a developer whisks in, does his little thing, makes all his money and whisks out, and then leaves any issues that happen. Bye-bye, I'm gone. I mean, they're not part of the solution. They're just part of the cost.
And I understand, and knowing that that's the mindset, it's indicative for us that we have to hold them to that level.
Well, that's what I'm worried about, getting the money up front. It's like,
That's why
the
we're
way we
having
let
this.
them all, we all let them, and like it's interesting. So here, I mean, if you guys lived here a long time, I don't remember the 80s in Castle Pines. Guy was building, right? Started putting in some infrastructure, started putting in some stuff, goes bankrupt. Well, the people out there were literally paying $8,000 or $9,000 taxes a year to make up for the developer walk away. Interesting. So the state passes this law, right? If you're going to be a developer, you have to put up all these bonds. You have to cover the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the roads, the sidewalks. You have to cover everything. Now all of a sudden we have metro districts that, like, here's that law. They just go wing. Like that law like doesn't even exist anymore. It's like that's what a metro district does, is it just bypasses the law.
We've seen that with a few districts that the significant amounts of debt taken on by developers.
That's what's going to happen in Erie or Aurora. It's like, yeah, they have a master plan, but if it doesn't actualize to that level,
I mean, we're 40
and
years
it's
later.
like this level,
You got
the debt's still to this level on the backs of this. And they're not going to let you not pay that.
one or two places, right? Southeast. Since you're a wholesale distributor of Denver Water, they might have some master plan documents that can provide some insight.
To be honest with you, oh, sorry, Karen. Karen is the one who scheduled some of these meetings, actually. Denver Water has been a lot more forthcoming and helpful with some of the projections and information than certain other entities. So, I mean, we are operating in an interesting bubble as far as information goes.
Todd, your question about Lakewood is really pertinent to any defense that the board might have to do of its overall number later on, in that, be an incredibly interesting deposition to throw at a judge and say, Inches, you know, we did our very best. We have to do our due diligence. You do the best you can to represent the citizens of the district. And if the city of Lakewood doesn't want to share what it's sharing privately in the council planning meetings, then we can't do but our best effort to try to make up what that number is. I'm thinking myself of, you know, we got lines that run right across from Colorado College. Not Colorado College,
Yeah,
CCU,
CCU, Colorado
Christian
Christian.
University. And across there, those empty fields could be 5,000 apartments easily.
Well, that's what they're talking right now. We're talking about all that development there and how we get water and sewer taps in there.
So we have an interesting, and I want to keep, you know, grinding you down with all of our, but.
Sorry here.
It's not, just so you know, it's not
But
personal.
yeah, you know, so we have this, the Alameda IGA coming up, and it's like, it was like written on a napkin from Denny's in 1952. And it's like now it's like there's this super high development that could start happening, right? And it's like, oh, the little bedroom community of Lakewood, you know, they just like, well, we'll put in X amount of single family homes. And it's like all of a sudden, like, oh, we're gonna pack the crap out of Kipling. And it's like, you know, we've got all these variables in IGA, you know, working with a different district. We're still looking to make sure the lines of delineation, I mean, we found stuff we didn't know we owned and others didn't have.
Don't worry about it, they have bike lanes.
Nice.
Anyway,
Yeah, you don't need parking.
it's gonna create, and it's in a capacity area that's red for us. See what I'm saying? And it's like now all of a sudden, this is like coming into play and it matters to us. And it's like, so you're getting the pressure of Lakewood, like, well, you guys gotta do it. And then, you know, you've got another district that, you know, and builders. But then, like I said, I don't work for the builders. I don't work for the city of Lakewood. I work for these people that are here. I don't really care about these other folks. I'm sorry. My job, these people voted me in.
All right, it's our fiduciary duty to
Yeah.
protect this district.
Yeah.
So Jeff and Todd have been actually providing good meat to as to where some of my questions sort of were based from. It's a little more than just, you know, what does the statute say or what is, you know, we are again, it's sort of this informational bubble. And we have to account for certain events that obviously have just, you know, manifested themselves that everybody thought would happen for another 500 years.
Don't have all the variables.
But yeah,
Section 2.
and sorry, I interrupted.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question on timing. Is there Tabor compel us only to raise the rate once a year? Or
The only requirement is the 30 days notice.
30 days?
And
It's the only requirement.
notice.
I would say it's all fair game as we learn more, establish a number and then, you know, take another cut at it. And
That's why we wanted to bring in these folks and, you know, we wanted to make this to where it's more like when we're dead and gone or unelected or, you know, not here, that it's something built, it's built into the operational psyche of this district that we twice a year or whatever, quarterly, we look at these tap fees and make sure we're right up against the ceiling. And I would like to go through the ceiling. Like I
I
said,
agree.
I'd rather have the government say, yeah, you better back that off. And Dylan's like, wow, Jeff, you're crazy. And I'm like, I would take that any day over the constituents calling in and saying, what were you guys thinking? Because I can't answer that. I can always answer the government. I was trying to do the best I could and I got a little too crazy.
well, we gave adequate notice of this board meeting and I don't see anybody representing the development community here tonight. My recommendation to the board is somebody who's leaving in May 22nd. Keep saying that, I can't.
We know where you live.
Yeah, you know
Yes,
what I mean.
Karen.
It is give the next board something to improve upon, but don't wait for the next board to establish a number.
Oh, we're not.
Yeah, just
Mhm.
get it.
Yeah, it's gonna happen very
Get
soon.
it. Good. I mean, I wish, Amara, thank you so much for your input. I really wish we had 20 or 30 citizens talking to us and killing an hour of our time to hear what y'all, the thoughts are from the community. That's really important to us. We need to have a sense of what the community wants us to do. Because when the developers find out what direction we're headed, we're gonna hear from them.
Well, I think even our direction, it sounds like, is up, but they did the analysis, just gonna caution, and this is, your analysis is kind of the same as the back of an envelope calculations, because this buying method is not complicated. So it's all reasonable. I want to put out there that these are right, these are real state statutes, and they have, he said there are court cases there, it has been challenged. It's not a trivial thing, and the developers do have the money to take you to court if you are not linking it to the infrastructure. That's why it's important to have it linked to the infrastructure. That's why he went through so much meticulous detail to make sure that that is what it was. There's specific things you can charge for. There's certain write-ups you have to do, and it's a real thing. I'm going to say my research showed you would like to make the constituents happy and have the government come after you. They changed this law that you could do whatever we're doing, same thing we're doing here in North Carolina. And they said that the only way that you can do it in North Carolina from now on is to do it exactly the way Terry did it, which is to say that our tap fees would have to be $1,000. And they had to pay that. It's not trivial. That's a lot of money.
Right, however, what, to me, I guess then my point would be in this is, unless we include the future, we're underestimating everything.
Well, so let's look at the future. First, did you see our master plan?
The consultant, engineering consultant report?
Yes. That
Yes.
we haven't gone through and made plans for. So the other piece of it is some of the capitalization costs come from capital improvement plans versus infrastructure replacement plans, because that's the difference between the maintenance fee and the capital growth fee. So did you do differences in there? Did you account for anything between you and Christine for?
We didn't account for the future projects in there from what we gleaned from that. They were mainly repair and replacement projects, not, there may have been some upsizing in there, but I'm not sure that was.
No, they completely discounted all upsizing that was
Yeah.
identified in the master plan. So the master plan showed that there was significant capacity issues. So I understand that what you're doing here is the buy-in, and that's predicated on the capacity that we have, but our master plan says we don't. And that is more specifically right here in this rear gulch and not in the southern basins. But how can we account for that? Because we don't have the capacity. So, and we don't, so how did you do that? Since you did the equity, but you didn't have a plan. Do you need a plan? What do we need to do in order to take that into account?
Okay, wait a second. I can say-
To account for
You
the
know,
upside.
so
you are-
one complication here is that you have parts of the system that are at capacity and some parts that are not.
Yes,
So we worked through that. Instead of looking at the ultimate capacity, the value of the system divided by the capacity of the system, and I think the capacity they gave us on water was 17.9 MGD or something like that. When we looked at the capacity values they gave us and trying to figure out, well, what's the peak demand of a SFRE, and we're able to tie that all back together with with the information report. So we went to the equity buy-in, which is like, let's look at the value of today's system among the new customers to where, and the theory is that with the equity buy-in, everybody has kind of an equal share of the value of the system. You add in, you have two customers, they each own 50%. The third customer comes in, you each own a third, so on and so forth. And that's kind of the concept behind the equity buy-in. And also a method that has been used with a lot of the districts around the area in years past. We first looked at a different methodology, which is looking at, here's the system dollars, here's the capacity of the system, MGD, and getting a unit cost capacity, multiplying that times what's the potential capacity of a 3/4 inch for one SFRE. The consultant report had something like 800 gallons per day, which after calculating out, that's like 220,000 gallons a year. And we didn't have the exact same data for wastewater. They didn't provide those same type data points. So we had to kind of jettison that. Those fees would have resulted in low fees because we're divided by capacity rather than customers. If we had an engineering report that said, here's where your growth is gonna be in the next 5 or 10 years. Here's the lines you have to upsize, here's the capacity you're gonna add. That changes the equation quite a bit, figuratively and literally, to where we would want to know what's gonna be the existing and future capacity of the system. We want to know what the capacity requirement of the 3/4 inch meter is and that sort of thing. But that information wasn't available to do that.
When you're saying that, when you were talking, it sounds like there's a difference. We don't have all the information. Lakewood did provide a lot of information for their plans, but it wasn't a comprehensive list. They show us plan view, all seen the Union Corridor built up to the nth degree. They didn't provide that specifically. They did give us some information along Alameda. So that was in the master plan, that kind of stuff. But the numbers, so we don't have that to plan for. What we do know is little bits, is that if we don't have capacity right here, we don't know how to account for these 30 homes coming in. So is that something that would be like a bare bones buy-in? And then if we have to upsize that pipe, you're already showing.
No,
ahead.
I'll give you the consulting answer.
Yes.
It depends.
Well, is that, I'm wondering, if you talked about the participation fees, and you just say it all depends.
Yeah.
So, and because I have been struggling with this, because it is, in most cases, I know we don't have the capacity, but the places that are going to be built at this point in many places are very small. So it is not fair to say we have to upsize, we do have to upsize the pipe, but they don't need to bear that whole cost for another ADU or something. But we can't just keep saying, oh, just shrug one more, because we've done that. We're already over capacity, so we cannot bear it. So how do we do, is that another study? Is that an upsizing? Is that a development fee at all? Is that a participation fee? What are we looking at?
Well, the participation fee is just a development fee. The way I've spoken about it, kind of the same thing. Participation means it's just for a unique subset of the district.
Yes.
In terms of areas of, in some municipalities or cities, they might have different zones. They have a north zone and south zone. They calculate system development charges are different because they're run by different plans, so they're not really connected. The challenge with Green Mountain perhaps is that you're a looped system, so it's all kind of looped together. But one thing I'm thinking about, I'm kind of shooting from the hip. I'd have to to noodle on this a little bit. But if there's certain areas of the system that are at capacity, you know that, hey, this is at capacity, it serves these 500 customers over here. If you could peel off, well, here's the area that has capacity, how many customers are here existing for the equity buy-in method, or what is the capacity of this system, or hey, we're getting in 400 new homes to this area, what's the incremental or maybe participation level fee we need to charge here? The challenge is that the water system usually looped. It's all you can't. It's hard to just pull out a system. They can't. This little section neighbor can't operate independently of where there's capacity. But I mean, those are kind of things that when you get to like a level 2 details, that if you have a current master plan system, that's where we'd be sitting down with the engineers and kind of walking through that, trying to stepwise. Okay, let's see if we can break this out and determine, does this need to be a specific zone for some reason of a fee because it operates independently of these. Yeah, it's got some backbone stuff in there. There's a couple ways you can do that. Like I said, you can look at that from just parsing that out or looking at the main extensions that need to be acquired here or up here. And yeah, there's a number of ways to look at it. Whether it's equity buying or capacity buying, but trying to slice off components of the system, that does become a little more difficult. But typically, if you do that, the engineers or the district or the city would usually have a master plan saying, here's the north zone, it's yellow, here's the south zone, it's green. That's pretty simple. There's a highway going in between it. So, well, this is independent of this. But like I said, you've kind of got a looped system and it all needs to work together.
Yeah.
So
we could probably do it for, like I said, this Weir Gulch North area. I think that's pretty independent. It's large. It's large. That would be like the 3 zones. But what I'm hearing is there's probably what we are seeing in that we are going to have more development.
Right.
And we know that that's coming down from Union, at least Union Corridor and this upsizing is just that we know that that's happening. And you didn't see that because it's not a master plan, because that wasn't committed by Lakewood.
Right.
So what we need to do is figure out, is that a next level study or is that later, or does that make sense?
Yeah, but this is that variable of the future that's gonna cost us today, and we're gonna be playing from behind, and that we need to figure out how to factor this in. Is this all this little stuff, you're talking depth by 1,000 cuts
No,
on that one zone when you started out.
Right, at which point do you
This
get that
year.
inflection point? It's like, you know, hypothetically speaking,
Yeah,
these people are getting
$30
charged
here, a couple
$4,000,
Yes.
$4,000,
Better
suddenly the
chance.
SDF needs to be cranked up to $8,000 in the next 5 units or something, you know, when do you? Or do you
Sure.
gradually price that in? How do you price that in?
because, you know, I don't want to get into the zone part right now, but, what I want to know is this, you're saying two things, there's a level 2 thing, or can we do this on a case-by-case basis? What makes the most sense for, can we evaluate the exposition development right now and say, okay, we've got this new backbone thing, but we do know we need to come up with a methodology for how to upsize that pipe because it's already at capacity and we need to do that. Does that make sense?
That would be a very clean thing. We could, for the time being, we assume that, let's say your existing system is at capacity. This new stuff that's coming in, although it might be part of the system over here. What's the cost?
Can I just speak to something briefly?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hey, hang on just a second.
So,
Sorry, we don't have.
It's Kristen.
Oh, is it Christian? I'm sorry. That was mine, sorry.
So we could look at that from incremental expansion methodology of saying, use this area over here. And if it's really going to be independent of the existing system, we can, how many units, how many SFREs, what's capacity, what's cost, that's fairly straightforward. Whether you want to combine that with make it a hybrid or something, we just have to look at that. But that's the kind of data we would look for in a master plan, is getting that information, and then trying to figure out, well, what's the methodology?
So it sounds like our master plan is, which we knew, we just haven't been able to get back to it. Flush it out a little bit. Christian, I'm sorry, I forgot you were on there. You can
That's
go.
okay. I just wanted to point out that we need a little bit more information about that master plan showing those capacity issues at ultimate build out, because you want to consider what's the 29 that are coming in compared to what was included in ultimate build out in that basin. And I think we can look at that information and we can assess whether you need equity buy-in plus, you know, some improvements or not for these homes, but or whether that needs to be, that cost needs to be addressed by a larger component of the district, because or not, because whether that growth will reasonably happen. That's included in the master plan.
Right, I mean, I don't know this terminology, but so say we're at X for these things. Legally, is there allowed to be, for lack of a better term, a special assessment that looks at a particular development and assigns costs to that?
Well, I think you're probably describing the participation.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're doing.
But if that's just going to Denver Water, are we allowed to have our own?
No.
we can too.
The Denver Water relationship to participation fees, that's what they call theirs.
Okay,
So you, the district, could charge a Green Mountain participation fee.
versus
And it would come to
the
the
water tax.
It would be in addition to the tap. Yes.
Is this right, Dylan? So for example, hypothetically, we had to go and improve 600 feet of main line. We as a district, because of the development, then we as a district collect whatever we think is appropriate as a cost and labor and everything to expand that line, that 600 feet of line.
You could collect a fee related to that capital.
So like directly to the developer, is that how that would work?
Yes, as a condition of the permit.
But the problem with that, it becomes a percentage, so that developer would be responsible for a specific percentage of that that development, and then the district would incur the rest.
Maybe, one of the alternatives that Todd brought up was you bear it all, but then there are downstream developments that will pay back the developer for it. There's procedural flexibility in how you do those things.
Okay, well, that makes sense then. So I just know the clock's ticking on that one, where that could hit any time now. And we need to be, this is why we're playing from behind.
Well, these are great questions. I appreciate it. Information for you.
From, before we move to the next part, though, I don't think, I'm not there as to what the next step would be. We can pass these fees. I feel like there is more work to be done that would give us a sound basis for this incremental method that we are looking at. That I was looking at anyway. And that would justify, so that we don't have to do the little steps in the death by 1,000, bring the policy together. So it needs to happen somehow. Where do we go from here? Is it the master plan is the next step, is to get all of that, and we can put together everything we've seen. We've got some start from Lakewood, but we can throw everything else that we've seen in there so that we can plan for that and work out that kind of master plan. Is that what you would need? Would we need to do that, or should we just, and this is a possibility question from you, but I would like to know what policy we'd like to set here.
Well, for hypothetically speaking, if, again, we're in the informational bubble, if we were to go in and just based on, say, birdies chirping, say the city is looking to bulldoze a certain section that's currently commercial and turn it over to, however many apartments, and we could look at the current, say they just Van Gordon, 300, whatever units.
Right.
You look at the rough square mile, could do a little bit of GIS work, and you say they're gonna bulldoze the rest of this district over here and, multiply by. Could we use that as an estimation for the future growth?
Yeah, we could start there. It's when it comes down to adopting, we obviously want to have some substantiation behind the numbers and some sort of basis on the estimate. We would feel comfortable with that. I mean, master plans, obviously, you get 2 or 3 years out, you never know what's going to happen. But they have some sort of base of how they've calculated this cost and capacity. But yeah, information like that would be a good starting point to give you, an idea of what that might do to the fee. Might change the methodology of how we do this, which could, so again, if we kind of unzip this again and we start adding this stuff in, it could change things and we might end up at the same place. It's possible.
Okay.
But we've looked at it, right? And so then now you've got these boundaries in which you can decide to operate in and decide to do make policy decisions.
You mentioned before policy decisions that we would, that we should look at in order to change the fees, but even what kind of examples?
However, the discussion tonight, there's been a number of things brought up, but like I said, we're here to present the fees based on our experience of calculating the fees, what we incorporated, and we like to be able to provide options to you. We've done that here. We'll come back with more options looking at these other things. But our thought is we're providing the options here for which the board to make a decision or incorporate a policy in the decision. We don't have any recommendations on a policy.
Have you seen policies for oversizing or upsizing?
Yes, yeah. In fact, I'm working with Oklahoma City and they have an oversizing policy in their SDC. It's kind of different than here. They pay for the upsizing as part of the SDC, and it's just different. But they have an upsizing policy. Other communities have it. I believe City of Pueblo, Cheyenne. I think even Denver Water has upsizing, but it's usually a case-by-case basis. A lot of communities have them.
Are those available for us to see or read, or are they like
They should
proprietary?
No, they should be in their municipal code, or a district should be in their operating rules. I imagine that places like Crestview and Public Crestview, because they are still kind of growing. We just got that new work from Kim Keller Ranch. They're in a similar position. They're pretty much developed. They have one development coming in that they're going to have to build a line. And I believe that line is to be contributed back, but there might be an extension part, I'm not sure. So those all should be available online.
So that's the one off of Kickling there. That King Carl thing there.
I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's a fairly sizable development, so it might be, it's like 300 homes. So, but yeah, the line extension policies should be available, and I think everybody bases their line extension policy off of what the other cities do next to them.
Well, that's what I was just curious.
Yeah. There's,
And
it's, yeah.
Historically, the district has had developers have paid for additional capacity and additional facilities that are required. So an example is Tamarisk. They paid their tap fees, but they also paid for the lift station development. And then the hospital and those districts in that area paid for all of that capacity and contributed additional pump capacity in addition to their system development fees. So the district has always, to my understanding, operated on this kind of hybrid approach where you pay your system development fees, but if there are additional facilities or capacity that are needed, those are paid for by the developer as well.
There's some precedent there.
Yeah, I think that's true, except for when there's an existing line, and we have just been assuming that those existing lines will handle it, and that just doesn't seem to be true.
Yeah, you just need to look at that model and where that model, what all that model incorporates at ultimate build out, and look at those assumptions at ultimate build out compared to what might happen. And
Well,
that's something we need to get a little bit more detail from to
honestly,
see those
I am-
incremental numbers in the Weir Gulch.
Because I'm looking at existing capacity first. And I know there's an ultimate build out thing, but if there's already an existing capacity problem, that's what
I don't believe there is. I don't think existing capacity has, I have to look at the maps
Uh,
again,
yeah,
but I
I
thought
know.
those were at ultimate.
and I've seen the reports, there's not really a problem unless we see it backing up, and it's just not where I'd like to operate from. I'd like to make sure that we don't see it backing up. So, if we're in that safety margin, then
It's a little too late if we see it back up.
a little too late.
Well,
So-
red means red to me, so it's, it's like if it's gonna mean something else, and don't tell me it's red,
Yeah,
and then come back and tell me it's a slight shade of yellow.
There's
That's
no-
not gonna work for me, especially, I don't care who you are, what your degrees or license are, don't tell me that and then tell me it's something else. Red is red, that means stop, that means evaluate what's going on. Of course, you have a safety factor in, but it's like your outlet, you don't put 27 things on a single outlet just because you can, but you burn up your safety factor, so.
Well, there's no reason we can't cost out improvements to every red area we have in the plan.
right. I think
And
they
then
did cost it out,
those
they just
are-
didn't.
Whenever a developer or within the district or outside the district impacts those red areas, we have a cost associated with that.
Exactly, so.
And we put, that's a good policy to have, is that we're gonna have a fixed cost that we know because we've looked at it, and it isn't, well, I think it's 75%. It's, what is it? We need to know the number.
They did cost all those areas out, they just didn't put it on a priority, they just kept saying, we'll monitor it until we see. something.
Well, can't be in the business of we'll monitor it anymore.
It's been, in some of
Yeah,
those, it's been really a lot of.
Those days have
years.
ended.
Yeah, decades in some of those. places.
My sense of this board isn't gonna go for that.
That's exactly right.
I have one more question. You mentioned that we would need to keep a list up to date, to keep our fees up to date. That was relating to infrastructure, so that we're not just raising by inflation from here on in. What did you mean by that?
Well, if you want to do regular increases or evaluations, you just want to make sure your asset list is up to date. If you're going to follow the same methodology we did here. In terms of increases, a lot of communities, some, if they're growing rapidly, will look at SDC's calculation each year because a place like the town of Ely, so much changing on an annual basis that you almost need to do that. But what we've seen is, and when you look at the AWWA M1 manual, which is the rates and charges Bible, it'll say, well, you should, if there's not been major changes in the system, you can look at calculating, doing this study every couple of years, maybe 5 years or something. But in between that time, if you're adopting fees, some communities might say, well, we're going to adopt this fee today of $1,000, but for the next 5 years, we're increasing by inflation or the ENR index or some sort of, factor. Now, one council can't hold a future council to something or board and whatnot, so they can obviously change that, but some do adopt that language in there, so it's set it and forget it in a sense that next year just clicks in an additional 3% or whatever the percentage is that the district feels would still represent the value of the facilities each year to where it falls in the, and that's pretty simple. I mean, a lot will just adopt it and then do nothing for years, which is not the right thing.
So if we did that now, that's what we did before, and we kind of upped it, and if we applied the same methodology to bring it up with just the SCPI, the engineering
Yeah.
index, that would put us a little bit over what you've recommended here.
If you adopted today's fees,
I mean, based on
Yeah.
last year's fees plus the,
plus this, it could, and again, I'm not a attorney, so I don't know the threshold at which development committee might say, wow, this thing's $200 over what the maximum supportable is, I'm gonna go to court.
Yeah.
I think there's probably, like I said, there's the rationally related and rational nexus component of it that might provide that leeway.
We've actually had people kind of start laughing hysterically when they saw our SDS because they.
How low they are?
How low they are.
How will there?
do you think that is, why do you think people would be laughing at our rates when they're in line with what you were saying is totally justified?
I don't know.
Because what I have seen is that we sometimes compare to people that have water rights and river infrastructure, just as a distributor, we don't have as much, so it's not like asset management. So if you're not comparing apples to apples, that's why they get bigger.
Well, the thing is, your fee might be $6,000, but then you're paying, the developer's also paying 10 grand in Denver water. So if you add that together and compare against the city, like Westminster or something like that, compare those tap fees, they're gonna be very similar or something like that. Because the 6,000 they're paying here is for transmission and distribution. That's it, no treatment, that's all Denver water. So you have to think, when you try to compare the district's fees, you have to compare both. You have to add those together and then compare against other cities. Now, comparing against other districts like Bancroft Clover and Carroll and Crestview and Lakewood and all that, that's more equal comparison because those are all wholesale master meter customers in Denver water. They have the same type of infrastructure. I'm pretty sure they all have their own storage. There might be one or two that does not, so that might make things a little different. But those are what you want to compare against and why they might laugh at that.
Here's my problem with that, and I agree with you, because that's all you have to go on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the data, but it's like, are you looking at the tail or the rear end of the dog? And I want to be the front of the dog. I'd rather somebody looking at my tail than me looking at theirs. I'd rather be setting the pace than following it, because like you said, if they've been amiss, and like, look, this is a part-time thing. This takes a lot of our individual time. You know, we're not embedded in here full time. So, you know, but it really requires that kind of mindset. I mean, this is really a critical thing. And if you're not evaluating that all the time, and I don't believe they are, I mean, and it's nothing against them or anything like that, but it's just the way things work in this country. People let things slide. You're always,
We'll catch it next year.
yeah, your lack of focus for whatever reason, but you know, the focus should be on maintaining, and are you at your right sized, right price levels, you know, and that should be an annual event.
And so this brings up this policy issue that some of these communities might be lower than others because they've made a policy decision saying, hey, we only want to recover 50% of the maximum supportable fee. We called the consultant in, it says it'd be $10,000. We didn't like that. We're going to charge $5,000 and get the rest from residents because we believe A, B, and C. So when you look at surveys, it's one data point of many things behind the scenes that survey doesn't tell you, just like you have mentioned. And so it's a great slide. People in councils love to see that slide, but there's a lot behind that. Maybe they're on the tail end of their 5-year study status and they've just not kept up, or they've just not adopted new ones for quite some time. So those are the policy decisions that I kind of referring to, is like, here's, we provide the facts, and then the district or the cities can then decide, well, let's go from here with that, and we're gonna do 3% per year, or we're only gonna charge 50% of the total. Decide how else you want to cover capital surcharge or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, Alex, how long did we go without a tap fee increase from the, it was like 05?
2004, I believe. Well,
2004.
initially we thought it was 1999, but there was something and they said 2004.
So my point is, we weren't, I mean, why? You know, I mean, so if I'm looking at
Over 10
other
years.
districts, if you assume that they're similar and they're not asking these questions, if we're all kind of like, what's that, you know, the word I'm looking for, I want to just say kind of like a level of ignorance that's just accepted as normal, and you're not focused on what you should be, and we were that far behind, it's like, you can't tell me when you see the prices on everything going up, that somehow tap fees are supposed to be very stable. And it's like, it shouldn't be that way. It should be reflected, you know, the price of what it costs to do business is the price of what it costs to do business. Now, if we start seeing a deflationary thing, fine, I don't see that. And the fact that we waited 20 years to raise ours or whatever, I mean, it was way longer than it should have been. We're still probably playing from behind. That's what I'm trying to say. I would rather be leading this pack than trying to understand what they're doing or not doing.
Well, we weren't happy to go back and sharpen our pencils at this. And future growth is to see how that pencils out in terms of a fee, whether that's more representative based on what you're going to see in the future, because you do want to recover that cost in advance to an extent. With that new development, that wasn't included in this first pack. So this is our first cut here for the board. See, this kind of conversation we want to have to get some feedback.
So what's the ask? What would you need from us to go to this? What do you call it, a level 2 or tier?
Well, tier 2 is just me, we're going into a little more detail. Do we want to investigate, start breaking apart the existing system and looking at capacities there, and then, or do we want to just treat that as a system as a whole? That's one question. And then do we need to reevaluate then if we're looking forward here with capacity? Do we need to change our denominator here to be consistent with capacity rather than equity? And so we need to get a couple of questions answered on detail. I think maybe that's more working with Kristen and getting some direction from her on that, and then just getting some numbers on the forward-looking component of that. The only other thing that I'll offer is that you know, the data we have is only as good as the data we receive.
Right.
And one of the challenges with the buy-in methodology is we're given an asset listing, and we are assuming that that is really representative of the system. Now, what we did with the accounting asset listing was we went back and looked against what the other consultants listing was. They maybe got from the same place, but maybe not, because they had listing of all the diameter, inch feet of mains and all that. And their replacement values and our replacement values came out fairly similar. But it's always one of those things that there might be something in the asset listing that either A, is not there, or so that's just one caveat. But we did do a double check against what the previous consultant had when they had a replacement cost listing in their asset management plan of here's the value of the system based on their analysis. We tied out pretty close, but there might be, so that's maybe with tier 2 we can dive into that a little bit more, get a little more detail about that. It may not change anything, but it's just one of those things that.
So a question for me. So when you recalculate, say, the tap fees to the new fee, that just assumed the last fee we had. It's not just an independent calculation that does not look at any other fees, or does it look at our prior?
It does not consider it. The only time it considers the existing fees when we compare the price between the two.
So the reason I was just asking that was, so like say Alex put together a spreadsheet that went from like 2004 up until now. And if we went whatever, 16 years or however many years without doing a rate increase, is there a way to bring those 16 years back into play to bring our fees 16 years into the future?
You mean collecting, trying to find a way to recover that lost money?
No, but to reflect it today. So I'm just gonna make these numbers up.
Okay.
So let's say it was $1,000. And every year, it was a 10% inflation.
Okay.
So in that next year, it'd be 1,100. The year after that would be whatever, 1250, whatever it is. So when you get through that 16 years, let's just say that the fee is $3,000. You know what I'm saying? Is there a way for us to start and bring that fee forward and justify that? As opposed to just the calculation that's here.
Just build on the $3,000 in terms of.
Well, like that fee where we went however many years, I wasn't here, but those number of years that no rate increases were on there. I'm just saying, I'm not saying go back and get the money from the people. I'm just saying bring that fee to where it is relative to today.
I have to say that a couple things, this is kind of what I was asking. If we had done that, we'd be getting a higher fee than what is recommended here.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
The two downfalls there is that one, it's not tied to the system, and two, it assumes that the original fee was somehow calculated besides arm waving, and we have no justification for that. We never dug up anything.
But what's weird is, so I started a thing where I was just going to different water district and pulling their tap fees. Our tap fees are 1/3 of like almost everybody's. I mean, they're 18 to probably $25,000.
Are those other districts or?
Yeah, I mean, it was like Willowbrook. I mean, I probably have 6 or 8 of them at my office, but it's like our fees are nothing compared to almost all these other places. And the same thing with like wastewater. I mean, our fees are probably half or, 1/3 again. And it just seems odd that they're all able to justify it, but somehow ours, that's what I was trying to figure out, like how of our reserves, not having debt, or, how many things all went into this that.
Jesse and Sam, I'm sure you know, but we lost the board.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I've got you, Jesse.
Sorry, I had my headphones out.
No problem. Yeah, I can hear you just fine, but we lost the board.
Yep. Sam had said the power was fluttering earlier. I'm checking to see if I can see the system from the outside, and it'll let us know.
No problem at all. I'll stand by.
Sam's restarting the meeting. They're going to take a break. Power is up, it looks like.
Cool.
Probably a temporary blip.
So we've got taking a break at 7:55. Do you know when they're going to reconvene, Jesse?
I'm not entirely sure. Sam just texted, said starting it back up and they're taking a break. They usually take, it's either a 5 or a 15-minute break, if I had to guess. So I think as soon as Sam gets back online, we can ask him what they've said, or he can just step directly into the other room and ask them how long they want to take their break, but he hasn't texted me back on that.
Perfect. No problem at all. I will stay close.
Okay. I will keep you posted if I hear something else as well.
Thanks, Jesse.
Which way should we talk about?
You're back.
We are back.
You're back. Video looks fine. Recording stayed on. I'll pass. Do you want to leave host on me, Sam, for that same reason?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Power
Sam,
blip there or just internet?
Completely froze.
Oh, it just locked up. Okay.
Sam, when does the board plan to reconvene?
They said 10 minutes, about 3 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
7 more minutes.
Cool.
Perfect. Thank you, Dylan.
I'm just gonna let you all do your math yourselves and see who shows up in 10 minutes.
Sam, was it just the Zoom session or was it the PC?
Entire computer.
So lower.
I'm sorry, what's that?
We just
The whole
still
computer.
eliminated
The
those.
whole computer.
Like if you just
Okay,
moved
let's take a look at it tomorrow.
forward.
Yeah. Then it goes down.
Well, but I mean, it's defensible.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Definitely. Well, and that's why I asked for the ENR. You guys got the cover.
Right.
I just.
Surprise.
How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop?
Johan?
What? Does that show you how old we are?
I remember that ad.
I remember that as well.
Kind of made the
Wise old owl.
Not mine, that t-shirt.
Did you like it?
She had no idea what it was.
You are kidding me.
What are you talking about? It's all that
Is that what
commercial.
the movie is?
I thought we'd have a full gallery tonight.
Well, it didn't say setting rates and fees on the agenda, it's just a presentation. So didn't hit the community hot button.
So
I
we
would
don't
just-
have to have a number in our pocket to bring to the March meeting.
Well,
Or do we?
is setting rates and fees on the March agenda?
I don't recall.
That's the one we did the notice for. I thought.
Then,
That was the plan.
then you don't have to pick a number tonight. In fact, you should probably not pick a number tonight. You should pick a number at the March meeting at which you are setting the rate.
Just pick one that I change it based on.
You can, I mean, you just, if you pick one and then just approve it in the next one, I think there's an argument that's, you've evaded the intent of the business.
I'm just thinking setting a number that's
Irrigation is
high.
high, but that makes sense because irrigation.
Should get some reaction.
So I've got that.
Listen to. Well, we've heard from the people.
Well, I don't think that generally the community would not care, it'd be the developers that care.
Don't define developers buy property in our community.
Yeah.
Therefore, they are part of our community.
Multifamily, sorry. We could do the Lakewood approach, right? The survey. I think it's explained. Lakewood, Jesus.
What a bunch.
I didn't even.
I didn't think about them not, they didn't provide all that stuff for the master plan, and I knew that was in the master plan, but yeah, how are you supposed to plan for it? You don't know that anything's going on, so of course you think it's a funding method, but
Yeah.
we are looking at it.
And for some communities, we've looked at the buy-in, but then realized that the incremental amount that's there is the minimis. And it's really the incremental we should be focusing on, because we're not going to see much development in that existing area. And depending on what master plan says, it can kind of change the equation a bit, literally. But we still go through the same analysis to look at both and what's reasonable and what's,
Are we recording again?
Oh, actually, we are recording.
Just.
Ken Carroll's, but they're gonna raise it to something different. I don't know how many miles and days they have. Actually, they said that to me. What?
That's this one, 2016.
2018, that's less than. Okay, so Ken Carroll.
This says 2016. Yeah, that's one pretty cool.
So Ken Carroll shows 25. Yeah.
What is the current green on tap fee?
6 something.
It's
What do we
right
have?
here in
Sorry,
the
I always-
presentation on
6720.
Yeah. No, that's the proposal.
six
we're below
6,086 and 3574.
So that was based off, I think we ended up using the ENR at the time.
2014 or so.
That was 2020.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't updated since 2004.
Well, got it.
All right.
Sure, boards had good reasons for what they did, but, or didn't do. But I can't figure out what the logical answer would be. It's justified. I'm
Actually,
sure you had that thought in 2020 when you proposed your resolution.
To justify it.
Not raising the fees.
Oh, yeah, they had us. It sounds like, I mean, I talked to some board members and they just. Yeah. Is the other things and.
Well, that's why I wanted it to be like an institutionalized thing, right? That you shouldn't have to bring that up or like, oh, it's been 20 years, we forgot. It should be something that just automatically comes up. Right, you either do something or you don't, but you should review it. You should always be looking at it.
Well, algorithms should be sufficiently flexible enough that as we have new data, it should just be
That's what
automatically
we're,
plugged in.
that's
why we're here.
Yeah.
Just, it tells us what the rate is. We don't really, establish a policy and then the algorithm does the work.
and then to the point of maybe we do this every 5 years, not every 2 years, if say a new variable shows up and you just add it to the equation.
3 years. for inflation.
No, I mean, just in general, if yet another some special variable needs to be included, like. a
So
marshal fire.
just looking at Willowbrook, excuse me, their fees range, they have like their tap fees, just the water portion, range from 8670 to 16,513.
Oh, like 3/4.
Or 3/4 inch.
That's a nice rate of return for Van Gordon.
Oh, we got kind of sidetracked from that one.
Their
Bye-bye.
their sewer is if it's, we're pretty close, if it's Coon Creek, whatever that means, it's 77.68 is their tap fee. Their Weaver Gulch is 78.43. So, I mean, to me, that's significantly higher than us.
One that does include the Metro waste, it looks like. So that seems to include Metro's fee.
Is that Denver?
No, it's Metro wastewater.
So it's the wastewater component of, Denver water, basically.
So that's not theirs.
No.
No, that's a separate fee.
Then it's closer. Matter of fact, it's about the same.
Yeah.
But then what's interesting is you look as they go from like that 3/4 to 1 inch. Oh my gosh, from 16,000 to 54,000. I mean, it's like ours is 20,000. I mean, we're not even half of what they're at.
It's a lot of sprinkler systems.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That's just one example.
All right, we're ready to go back.
Sure.
All right,
Move on to financial plan or do we?
yeah,
Okay.
let's go ahead.
Yeah, go to the next slide. Hopefully this will be a little more straightforward because there's good news here. Not that there wasn't good news before, but so as part of this study, Chris and I talked about initially was about tap fees, and we decided to look at the financial plan and the financial health of the utility just from a user rate perspective. And at the end of the day, like I said, financially, you're financially sound. You've got a healthy balance to where you can fund more capital improvements as necessary if something comes up. Your revenue streams are fairly stable. You have you bill bi-monthly. You do have a good amount of revenue stability because your customer use per customer is pretty stable throughout the year, isn't maybe 4,000 to 8,000 gallons per month. So good news there. Unlike many utilities who have a really cyclical type revenue stream and don't have high reserves, that makes them more susceptible. So when we're putting this together, typically the way the district is set up in terms of how you raise rates and how you track your revenues expenses is different than what we see most utilities. So traditionally with the district, we would see a financial plan and a cash flow look something like this, where you have your overall utility financial plan, but then you have a water utility and a wastewater utility. You'd maybe have an operating fund that tracks the rate revenue, the operations maintenance expense, any sort of debt service, that sort of thing. You have a capital fund, which would track your annual capital improvements and any sort of growth-related projects and tap fee revenue, and separate it like that. And then we would use that type of layout to help look at what are the revenue adjustments need to be on an annual basis to meet your annual operating and maintenance requirements. So that's what you typically see. The district's a little bit different. And what's interesting about the district, it's kind of, next slide, it's almost as if there's a mini cost of service within your financial plan, and which is pretty neat. So the way we've got this broken out is you have a number of components within your user charges. You have your service fee, you have your water volume rate fund, volume rate revenue, your wastewater volume rate revenue, and there's capital surcharge. Now, the capital surcharge is kind of baked into the user rates for water and wastewater, but we separate out here. So what we've done, and if you've taken a look at the memo, we've got a pretty lengthy cash flow there, but what we've done is we've developed a cash flow where we say, here's our service fee revenue, and here's all the expenses associated with that, all the volume rate revenue and all the expenses associated with that. So little mini sub-funds. And then from that, we said, well, is the service fee revenue meeting the 75% of employee expenses and all the other O&M that we've allocated to that? Same thing with the water volume rate fund. Is that revenue coming in from the volumetric rates covering the Denver water costs? Same thing with wastewater and Metro and the capital surcharge. And so what we're able to do, what we typically do with utilities, you'd have your rate revenue stream, which includes maybe a service charge and a volume charge, and it's $1 million a year. You need a 10% increase, so you just raise the 10% across service charge and volume charge, and we're done, we go home. But with the way the district does is that you have the flexibility of saying, we need to raise the service fee by 3% and 0 for the volume revenue, because we're recovering that each year. So we set up the fund like that to track what are the revenue adjustments to each one of these components need to be each year in order to meet their individual expenditures for the year. So that's how we set that up. Took us a while to kind of figure out the configuration there, but I think this is probably the best way. So next slide. We have a couple of assumptions for fiscal year 22. We're assuming a beginning balance of $20.8 million. And for the purposes of this study, I know that maybe the district doesn't have these target reserves, but for the purposes of our evaluation, we separated out 2 reserve targets, meaning that, again, typically in what other districts we work for, we have an operating cash flow reserve, meaning we want to make sure that we have enough money in bank in the checking account to meet an operating reserve. We don't want to go below that for an emergency. And then we have a capital reserve, our savings account. We don't want to go below that certain amount. So we kind of set up a reserve for in a similar manner for this. And operating was 25% of operating expenses, and that included O&M, Denver water purchases, metro costs, and the capital of 1-year depreciation at replacement costs. So just set that up as a target in terms of helping us develop what the revenue adjustments need to be. It's kind of the floor. We'll make sure we meet some sort of minimum requirement. Our growth is about 0.5%, but what we've done is we've accounted for as net growth. What we've accounted for is about 1% growth, but then we've also dialed back the use per account, assuming there's going to continue to be a slight reduction in use per account, just in being cognizant of water savings and the value of water. I mean, it's very, very little, but it knocks down that 1% growth in accounts down a little bit, so a little conservative. I believe we did something very, very similar to wastewater. There's a slight decrease. You're not going to get much from indoor. Inflation, 3% in general, recognizing that in today's environment, we don't know exactly what's going to happen in a few months, let alone tomorrow. Denver water purchases, we're assuming 4%. That's what we've assumed with the other Denver water distributors we've worked with recently. And metro wastewater costs, same thing at 3%. So what we wanted to do is we've thrown all this stuff into this cash flow that we have and decided that, well, what kind of revenue adjustments do we need from the service fee, volume revenue, water volume revenue rate, wastewater volume revenue rate, and capital charge. So we've got it here. Here are the 4 components. What we did is we looked at, well, we don't want to do lumpy increases of having 10% one year and 2% the next. And, you know, it's smooth and predictable, smooth and steady. So what we've shown here is, you know, fairly inflationary increases, about 2.5% for the service fee, 3.75%, so on and so forth. So nothing earth shattering there in terms of a jump in revenue. Now, under the capital surcharge, there are some projects that are larger in the last few years based on some from the master plan report that we initially set this up to where it was only do as needed increases in the years that we need them. And it turned out that we didn't need any increases in the capital charge until 2028 of 11%, but we smoothed it out over the couple of years to ease the impact to customers. And so with that, those increases, next slide for me. We have this summary slide here of with the proposed revenue adjustments, our revenues are meeting our expenditures. So the bar contains the 4 different types of charges, the revenues you get. The blue line is the expenditures. So over time, you are revenues are meeting expenditures, which means you're building up reserves on that blue line. You'll notice that in the first and second year, that blue line goes down, then goes back up. That is because in 2022, there was some carryover of capital projects, which caused our total expenditures to be a little bit higher, then goes down. But good news here is what this is saying. So next slide. And when we look at the reserve balances with the proposed revenue adjustments,
The bar colors here represent the operating capital reserve, but that still totals up to $20 million. You can see in fiscal year 22, your beginning balance is $20.2 million. And our target is around 6 million. So you're well above the target, but not only with those 2% increases or those increases for the different rate components, you're continuing to build reserve to where at the end of the study period, you go from 20 million to about $23 million. And you could say, well, you're adding $3 million to this large reserve, but you also have to consider that there's inflationary pressures. So $23 million in 2031 may not be $20 million today. You know, who knows what's going to happen there. But what this is also saying is that you're meeting your annual expenditure, your annual expenses associated with different rate components. You're also funding your reserve through SDCs and through any sort of annual surpluses you might get in any one year from your rate components. And you're continuing to build reserve, which frees you up to do those projects, the red projects and all of that over the study period without adversely affecting user rates. In fact, you can keep the user rates at those levels of the 2%, 3% we show. So good news, it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to maintain the system when you want to do capital projects. Incidentally, the system development charges, you didn't see that as a rate component. What we were assuming is that all system development charge revenue went directly to the reserve account. And we discussed with Kristen that if there's a unique project or a one-time project where you want to pull that out to use that money, you wouldn't raise your capital surcharge one year and reduce it. So the SDC would kind of be used to smooth that out or just fund the reserves. So good news on that slide as well. You don't often see this with the rate increases that we were proposing. So you started off in good shape, and what this does for you in 2031, it sets you ahead for the next 10 years. So this kind of looking forward, you're saying, are we setting ourselves up for the following 10 years? Next slide. So here's a bi-monthly bill comparison, single family customer, water volume, 16,000 gallons of wastewater. So you can see here that it jumps up from 152 to 157. That's a $5 increase per month over 1 year. Of course, it varies depending on how much you use. Now, the one thing is that the 16,000 gallons is all in tier 1, so it's the lowest water rate. If you go in the second tier, it's obviously going to be a different bill. So I just wanted to show the impact, the relative change there per bill as those increases. And what we've done is we've applied the specific 2% to the service fee or the specific 3% to the water volume rate, that sort of thing. So all in all, a good picture. The fact that you are starting with good reserves and that you are having fairly close revenue adjustments in each one of those components of 2 to 3-ish%. That's good. Now, this cash flow does consider system development charges at their current levels. So obviously, if we had a higher SDC, that would be additional funds. I mean, we're only assuming about 15 new connections a year, so it's not a substantial portion of the cash flow. So that was our financial plan, and it worked out well that each one of the rate components, the way they're set, they are fairly meeting their rate component expense. So I think that was the big key finding for us. And one of the things we want to find out whether that was occurring. So I think that's much shorter part than the STC component. So I'll take any questions on that as well.
Okay, Karen, you're all right? Just a small capital surcharge. Director Morgan over here has been fighting for, what is it, 0.5% or something to do the capital stuff. Rates.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the stuff, again, like you said, there's the stuff that comes from the SDS that goes to a specific purpose. You cannot be making up for shortfalls elsewhere with the SDS. So that's Director Morgan here was trying to kind of verbalize and explain that, despite some of the noise that's been received, to the point of you just increase the capital just a little bit in your monthly rates just to keep fixing the current existing stuff.
Maintain the based on the capital projects that have been identified annually.
Yep.
Improvement program, and the last few years, we did have to make an estimate on the project cost from the master, from the engineer's report
and look at, well, what's the average cost over 5 years? They had some lumpiness in there, so, you know,
How did you figure out what you're spending on the capital improvements per year? So you said it would catch up in 2011, where you had to be assuming some base rate, because all of those changes weren't going to be done in the next year or 5 or 10.
I'm sorry, say it again?
For the capital improvement projects,
Uh-huh.
you said you accounted for those in the spending.
Yes.
At what rate of spending did you account?
The capital surcharge covered most of those, and, you know, we raised rates to detail here, but the capital surcharge revenue covered a lot of those. The capital improvement program is about $2 million a year.
Through our conversations with Kristen and Doug, they indicated it was about $1.5 million per year that's being spent on capital. I mean, that can vary from year to year. So for example, this year you have the carryover from the previous projects you were able.
So there was, we pulled from reserves, in theory, we're pulling from reserves this year, because we have, it was like $3 million, but the capital surcharge pretty much covered the rest to an extent.
And so we had really detailed data for 2021 through 2026. And then after that, the master plan and the IRP from the previous project got a little vaguer. So we just assumed that 1.5 million inflated those days dollars. So if we have 1.5 million dollars a day, they were inflated to reflect inflation between now and 2027.
If we wanted to, I guess I was looking more for it out, like the way it is set up now. They have a really good setup to figure out that service fee that accounts for it. They just plug in so that when the employee costs change, that's all figured out. So I guess I was thinking more like that for the capital price. So if we needed to up it to 2, then we could, or 3. And so is that accounted for in here? If we could do that, you're just, what I'm seeing is that you're just saying keep it where it's at. And this would be a 2% increase for you.
Yes, the challenge with, unlike O&M, you just mentioned that's pretty consistent year to year, right? There's some lumpiness in the capital improvement program to where if you were to calculate the dollars per 1,000 gallons, it might be $2 per 1,000 gallons one year, $2.50 to $1.75. And so we said, well, it's at whatever rate today for water and sewer, let's just escalate that. And that should cover, we might draw down reserves a little bit in 1 year, but, you know, overall will be made whole over the study period. And that's the difference in the capital surcharges, that we're going to see more variation in the expenditures than we would on the O&M stuff. Because the Denver water cost, that's going to fluctuate directly with whatever you buy, what you get from the customers. That's going to be it's going to go in the same up and down in the same range. Same thing with metro.
But I think, Karen, too, if the board were to decide to advance capital improvements beyond the like normal 1.5 million, you decided we need to improve at a rate of 2.5 million. That's easily calculated. The change in the service, the surcharge rate to customers is easily calculated back from that, because you know we have rate and volume estimates that we use when we calculate the volume rates, and we apply that same denominator to calculate what the capital surcharge rate should be. So right now it's calculated, that surcharge rate is based on spending 1.5 million. If the board decided they wanted to spend 2 or 3 million as a general practice, then you would change that rate. But in an individual year, you absorb that flow by taking from the reserve.
Is the proposed practice different than we were doing, Kristen?
Proposed in this model? No, this model continues with the 1.5 million.
Okay, but okay.
Level.
No, the level of spending is the same, but the way that the rate is set, is it different?
No.
I don't see any difference. Okay.
It's the same
Overall,
formulation to calculate the capital surcharge rate.
Okay, so what is different here?
I'm not sure anything is. The goal here was to, are you maintaining revenue sufficient meeting, are your revenues overall meeting your expenditures?
And
Are
obviously
you-
we have a healthy bottom line, so
Yeah.
that we knew, okay.
Are you, the target reserves that we said, are you meeting those? Obviously you are. And are you adequately funding your capital improvement program through a combination of capital surcharge and or SDFs as necessary? And meeting the policy of maintaining a reserve level of where you're at today. Those are three primary things, just a diagnostic check.
Yeah, that's what this appears, okay.
Yeah.
Is there any difference in depreciation? I don't think we ever noticed that on previous budgets. Do you know?
Well, depreciation is kind of inherently included in the capital improvement cost. So in theory, your annual capital improvement should be equal to at least 1 year's depreciation. Maybe at today's replacement cost. You're spending about 1.5 million. We calculated a replacement cost depreciation for reserve around 3 million. Does that mean you're short $1.5 million a year? Maybe, maybe not. That's what that engineer reports should have told you, and because that's what we pulled the numbers from. So if they indicated that no, you only need $1.5 million a year worth of capital projects, then that's what we used.
That's the conflicting report we were getting. I mean, it started out at 100 million, which is like a
99.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to exaggerate. You know, so, and it was, you know, so we were always trying to wrap our head around that number, right? And then like, well, what are you really saying, you know? And then something like this, if you're hearing 1.5 over whatever over time, I don't know, are we keeping up with it, or are they saying 3 million and then we're upside down, you know? $1.5 million.
Yeah, suddenly catches up to you and suddenly 1 year.
It will at some point, it will at some point, and that's where. That's what I'm.
That is my worry. When I talked to Terry about it, he said this wasn't really so much of a, we set it to equal depreciation or versus the need of project. It was mostly, it was a decision at one point by one board and nobody wanted to up the number because it's not scary. So, and that wasn't his decision. It was a board decision, you know, and you can see how that would happen, but I think we fell off the, what's that?
With input from the consultant.
Could be, I don't know. All I know is we are not saying we have this infrastructure replacement plan that we need to have handled within 5-10 years. It's, well, what can we do with $1 million and we'll find something. So I would like to be more proactive about it, but so that's an interesting, that sounds like more of a policy decision that we could set and say that would tie it to the depreciation. And then that would give us.
That's actually
okay.
the point, yeah.
We could look at a scenario that looks at a more of a replacement cost. Replacement costs or depreciation escalated to today's replacement cost. I mean, that's not tied to anything specific, but in theory that your assets are depleting in value or depleting in usefulness each year by that amount. And of course, now that's based on accounting life and not service life.
Right.
So if you do service life, it might be much less, right? So again, you know, we could look at that. I mean, that was one of the things on the SDCs that we were using accounting life originally, but the engineer's report showed 80 years life for transmission mains, so we used that instead. But yeah, so we can sort of look at what the impact is of having a higher capital plan, annual capital plan, and see how that might affect the capital surcharge or whether you want to draw down some reserves.
Well, yeah, we were just taught a very harsh lesson with this whole last 2 years of how sometimes having cash in hand isn't the most financially effective thing. You know, we really kind of probably fell behind a bit on the capital improvements. So maybe a couple of years from now, that needs to be stepped up a little bit for a couple of years in a row or something. You go up to 2.5 million or something for a couple of years in a row, and then go back.
You know,
Burn a little bit
it's
of
like
cash
it-
to save
look,
cash later kind of thing.
you know, you don't do anything without a reason.
No, I agree. So to that's what I'm saying. Maybe a couple of years from now, it will make sense when hopefully some of the inflation stuff settles down a little
But
bit.
we're still flinging stuff at a wall, seeing what sticks, and I'm just not good with this stuff, you know, I don't, it doesn't feel right to me. I mean, I appreciate what you guys are saying, but it doesn't feel right. I feel like we're missing something.
We'd love.
I know that's your concern, like, how do we, like last year when you were talking about the additional 0.5%. You know, it's trying to understand this thing. It's a dynamic situation here, and I don't think obviously we're not doing poorly on this, but you know, that can like turn in a second. $20 million in an infrastructure world is nothing. It is nothing. Anybody listening, that's nothing to feel good about, because that can vaporize overnight. You just have to, especially with these mains, like I said, this was originally designed as a bedroom community with single family dwellings. That's what the plan was. And the plan has changed. And so I don't know how much we've evolved into this new mindset. And we better get there. And I don't know how to.
We know we're not doing badly. We know we're headed in the right direction. We just don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
Because the variables are unknown. And at some point, you got to throw something at the wall and decide it's going to stick. Because you got to work with something. If you're not going to get numbers from Lakewood, you're going to have to get something from somewhere else. You're going to have to look at your.
Well, I guess you know, maybe you need to. That's kind of the thing with the SDFs. If Lakewood's not going to give you a good vision, then you better armor yourself up to, like, until we have a vision, we need to stay at a static level, because that's what this is showing. It's a static level. I mean, there's variables you guys have added in, but it's showing a static level. It's not showing, you know, if Lakewood's got some crazy plan, and I'm pretty sure they always do, you know, that we're not aware of.
Well, with what I'm reading, there's certainly a lot of pressure on SDI to find ways around it.
Well, they're already doing it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's a lot of pressure to do that. So I think we have reason to assume larger numbers. So I don't think it's irresponsible to say we expect there's going to be pressure for additional development.
We should just send them the vision plan, the Union Corridor vision plan. They have it all lined up. They just didn't provide that to us as.
Well, that's what I was referring
Yeah,
to, just
just-
assume that they're gonna take certain sectors along the Union line and literally start bulldozing stuff and build it in high density units.
Because that is in their plan. It's not like we're making up the numbers here. That would give you something concrete to work from, at least some kind of standpoint. So maybe, can I send that to you and you can look at that as would that affect what numbers we're looking at, or the methodology or something, and if it'd be worth taking another look at it.
Yeah, certainly, and keep in mind that if that results in more SDFs, you're also going to have new ratepayers as well, which is going to change the revenue stream as well. So you benefit from that as well.
Well, maybe we can start there to see what's going on. Can I ask you a question on your plan? Can you see it again? I'm sorry. Just, I would like to know, I'm sure it would make sense, this would be a spreadsheet if you could go back to, it would make sense, you're going to provide an Excel sheet or someplace so we can see. where
Right,
that's all
right.
written.
So, yeah, so what we've got here is our draft, and we're going to go back and finalize this. We're looking for input from the board on making changes here. So this is our first cut draft, and yes, you'll get in fact, there's a memo that has the cash flow.
The finance,
You need to want
the detailed, no, I wanted all the detailed numbers. Just because you may not know the answer right off the top of your head either, but nope, we're down. It's probably like the last. No, it's not. Well, where's the? Oh, it's not this.
No,
You
you don't have a
said
backup slide where you can toggle into your, like a spreadsheet out of those bar graphs?
you had the detailed revenue streams.
In the memo, it might be, it's called a thin plan or something. There you go. Yeah, this one you're talking about. Go down to
Well, there is.
page 3 there. Is that number, which is summary.
This. So on. It will all make sense probably on an Excel sheet, but I wondered if you knew, and then you scroll down, this is all, the service revenue of $3,000. Yes, $3 million. And then you have use of funds, service fee down here. I guess I am thinking that like the difference between these two
Yeah, so if you
Right,
could scroll
is
down a
your-
little bit more. Oh, okay, so,
would be.
so
and then
that's
up to
what
the
those,
annual-
numbers are there, is the difference between the service fee revenue and the expenditures for service fee, volume rate revenue and whatnot.
But I wasn't getting that from those numbers. Okay, but that's what it should be.
Yeah, it should be. We'll go back and double check, make sure everything's copacetic there for you.
Very good.
You
Making
can-
sure I wasn't missing a calculation.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll go back and double check this out for you.
I think it's around 700, isn't it? 700. The delta on that.
Yeah, it was something, yeah. And then the opposite direction is what but maybe I was just looking at the wrong. But if that's my understanding of how it was working.
We'll
that's right.
check that, and if there needs to be correction, we'll let you know.
Okay. So, and on this one, for the financial plan, if this is just a check on that what we were doing is okay, then operationally, we wouldn't need to do anything different and our existing spreadsheets are probably fine. Is that what I'm hearing between you and Kristen?
If you have a regular practice of evaluating annually and making minor adjustments, financial plan or revenue increase adjustments, which I think you do, then I think we're saying what you're doing to an extent. It's just depending on, do you want to do equal annual increases? You know, what's the, you might have to change what we've projected here just based on what data you get in, but we're recommending that you still have smooth, predictable, lower revenue adjustments as time goes on. But you're doing that anyway. You're doing that now. So process-wise, no change. The exact percentages, that's probably needs to be reviewed annually based on budget.
Sure. The, because you have it broken out in components, they're not, you have a smooth, but they're not always, so some of them are the same, but that's not like the water volume rate increase, and that's passed along from Denver Water that is subject to change. I'm wondering if there's something that would make things easier. We could say the capital surcharge annual increase will be 2%, and we don't need to discuss that anymore. That's something that we'll set now unless we want to change it in the future. Does that make sense? That was what you were looking for specifically.
Yeah. That's kind of, yeah, and certainly because of the policy decision, but I think we were showing a 2% increase on, I can't remember.
Capital.
Stuff, yeah. Is it 2%? So you could say 2% capital each year and just evaluate that, and the Denver Water and Metro, or the water volume rate, and the wastewater volume rate just be adjusted annually based on what you know from Metro and Denver Water. Although I think Denver Water doesn't, I don't know if they give you the number and time for your next increase or not. There's like
Oh, yeah, it's always.
it's always last minute. Or
Yeah.
whatever. So,
Okay,
but so the percentages we have here, I think, are representative of saying that you've been doing this to an extent, these kind of inflationary increases each year. We're showing the same thing. So you're on the same path trajectory that we're on, and that you're doing what's required to maintain the financial health. That's really just kind of a check.
okay. How about the way that you had the two accounts separated? Did you see any need for us to actually change the accounts and transfer the funds like?
Okay, so we talked about the operating, Bobby and I went round and round about this for like 2 or 3 hours. We were just writing it out. I'm like, you know what, let's not try to fix what's not broken. And we came up with this instead, that, like I said, this is like a mini cost of service, because you're allocating costs to certain rate components. This is exactly what a cost of service does. You're allocating costs to different components of the system. So that's why we left it like it is. And, you know, I was expecting there to be a little more variance in terms of like the service fee needs to go 2%, the water volume rate needs to go 15 or something like that, but there wasn't.
So you've been diligent in staying on top of raising those different components.
Until we get to 2026.
Was that?
Until we get to 2026.
Perhaps, yeah, it depends, it depends on how the capital turns out, so.
The Colorado. board.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah. Who knows what we're gonna do that. But yes, we were just confirming that the process we're going through and it's producing, I guess, some of those.
That's, yes.
So that's our presentation for tonight. Happy to entertain any other questions, or if there's follow-up questions, we can work through Kristen and get some answers for you.
Well, I'm sorry if I'm missing any of the employees, but Doug probably turned out to be a rock star on this.
Doug was very helpful. Chris was very helpful. Yeah, it was the budget document that he gave us with the level of detail about historical water use, number of accounts. I don't think I've ever seen that in a budget document. So he actually saved us a lot of hours of work, which was great.
He does.
Well, thank you guys
Thank you.
for bringing that in. Do we need, so are we wanting them to maybe bring us a proposal for this tier 2? Something to look at? Is that something we want now? Or is that-
Yeah, I guess that was my question. Can we discuss more specifically what's next?
After some of the heated debate tonight, where are we heading next? I mean, so we have a notice, I believe. Kristen, is that right? Do we have a notice posted for March meeting for the
We
rates?
do. Yep, it's been noticed. So if you choose to change system development fees, you may, your public notice for that.
It's the general feeling, not consensus, but feeling.
My feeling is cost of living, just, the inflationary rate at this time. I don't know, that's a justifiable position, isn't it?
I'm not so sure what cost of living. I go with the industrial rate.
In ENR index.
Yeah. It's higher.
Is it possible to get the ENR, Kristen, or how do we get a hold of ENR
We
numbers?
we have that. We also have some, I'll see how relevant it is. We also have some future projected inflationary numbers on construction. We'll have to see if that website's still current. But we can provide you a couple of
Would
different.
it be possible to get those numbers for what the last, how many
If
years?
it's anything like my home project, I'm 30% over what I anticipated.
Oh, you're only 30?
Well, that was in a 30-some day time frame, so.
Lucky bastard.
We can provide some of the indices that we use.
How about 100?
Well, we need to have a factor, because I know we need to, we put it out there. I think we need to, we talked about, when you and I, when we were part of this last board, we had talked about 3 rate increases and we got 1 done. Now we're over a year later and
And to Director Renner's point here is we can do a number now, and then if we do proceed with the stage 2, then that's the other, thing that can proceed in parallel. Is that what I heard? I think.
Yeah, I just think a number gives something to the community to mull over and come back and tell us what they think. I mean, we think we know what the community wants to tell us. We think that's what they voted for last summer.
that's what we heard.
But if we establish a number, I think it gives people something to chew on, come back and tell us something. And then we know what we need to ask for. I don't know that we know that yet.
Well, I'm okay with the.
You guys have been doing this longer than I have, so maybe you do know what you want to ask for.
I would ask for the ENR and whatever other indices that we can look at, and that gives. people
That should happen at the next board meeting.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
for the stage.
At
2
a
thing, it's
minimum,
there.
and then maybe we, get a proposal from your company and looking at this tier 2. Like I said, I want to integrate this, institutionalize it. Like you said, boards can change things, but I think they would appreciate it. I think it should be quarterly or biannual or annual minimum review, that you're always looking at this stuff. And if we have this algorithm baked in, then you don't have to
not to hire us.
Well, you know, I'm sure there's always gonna be tweaks as things evolve, but it's like, we've been working on this for how long here? I mean,
Well, we first invited them in 2020, I said.
The irony is that, you know, for example, again, in 2020, we kind of just based the number essentially off. It was not CPI again. I think it was ENR or something. And your guys' research has just shown within so many, you know, basis points that we're not at least like, you know, out there on the moon, nor are we underground. So that's good to know. So, but so that was definitely emphasis to do the increase that we did in 2020, because again, that wasn't being done for 16. Yeah, so we need to, that was, yeah.
So Dave and Todd, are you guys good with, we'll get some number of the whatever inflationary index we use. But I think we need to be prepared to vote on that at the next board meeting.
I'm ready to vote on it right now if I do what the number was.
Well, we were.
I would agree.
Tonight is not the best
Well,
time for that.
yes.
We were ready to vote on it a year and a half ago. But yeah.
Well, yeah, we're under the 30 days. Are we okay in the umbrella, or we gotta wait till the board meeting to be okay?
For the March meeting?
Yeah.
It's my recommendation that you wait for the March meeting.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that being said, thank you very much for everything. I'm gonna go ahead and shut everything down. We have no requirement for executive session.
I don't believe so.
Okay, new business or notifications for next board meeting. I do know that Kristen Todd had a question about Jeff Tyus. Is there anything? Because Todd's not used to it and I'm not used to this onboarding of a new staff or, you know, staff member. Are we on track, or is there anything Todd needs to be doing, or are we holding up
No.
anything with onboarding?
Everything's on track now. He signed and returned the offer and the acknowledgement, and he's completed his background study, which was clear. So he is set to arrive on March 7th and complete his, you know, paperwork for payroll and verification of employment in the United States and all of those kinds of things that Doug will go through with him, then start meeting the staff, and then we'll work on transition meetings.
Okay, just a question. Can we add the discussion that we have had, staff engineer position to the next agenda?
Yes, yes. So
It is on the agenda. It's on the agenda.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's due to come out tomorrow. I'll send the draft agenda out tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm 50% more worried about that than when we spoke.
All right.
Is Todd still, oh, the presenters leave?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll make sure he has enough information of what to, idea of what to include in a proposal for tier 2. So we may have some
Clear as
back.
mud, or were we a little better tonight, Kristen?
About what?
You just answered my question.
You were clear enough for me to know.
Yeah. No, thanks for all you're doing.
Sure.
Okay.
One other question about new business. I would like some advice or a discussion on, anybody else attend the legislative updates from SDA?
No.
See what's going on there. There's a couple things going on. Did you see that?
Yes,
Um,
scared me to death.
so is that something that I don't know if I agree that the SDA position is the best position for our district on some of those things. Is there something we can do or get advice on, I don't know, as a board or as a district, that especially the dissolution of the dissolution of special districts caught my eye. And that was, they're making it easier that we could be assumed by Jefferson County and taking away the election option through this bill. And we are all in Jefferson County.
Yeah, there's a movement with all political operations to make things unilateral, for lack of a better word.
So that, I know the other one with the special district governance is going on, but I did notice when I was looking at the list of lobbyists that there's a lot of the home builders associations and the realtors and
Well, that shouldn't be surprising.
Well, look
And
how
all
that
the
whole
cities
county
and
commissioner
counties.
thing went. I mean, that's exactly how that road went.
And then special districts are represented by the SDA as opposed to the individual districts. And we don't have a lobbyist or anything, but I wonder if there's something we can do. So is that a discussion item or is there any advice you can offer via email? Just, I don't know what even we can do to keep track or make our voice known on that.
In general, or on those particular legislative issues that you've raised?
Well,
Concerns about?
in general and future, I guess, but I'm specifically wondering about that. The Jefferson County one, I worry about. There has been a movement in Lakewood. I know they have been asking repeatedly about that, but we're not wholly Lakewood. We do homes of unincorporated. So Lakewood can't follow that process of assuming us. They can other districts, but Jefferson County could. And that, I've heard nothing about that. I'm totally being paranoid and fear mongering, but if Jefferson County did decide to do that, that could be a one stop.
Don't give them any ideas.
For, yeah,
No, they're already
for the
talking about
developer, that Rooney Valley thing, they could get the development through easy and it would be a we're a healthy district. We've got money. It could be a segue to assuming other districts if they already want to get in that business, which is what I hear.
Karen, are you wanting to affect the SDA policy? Or we just get information? I mean, there are a whole bunch of ways to do that with SDA, from asking, somebody like Allison, who's vice president, to come talk to us, or just communicate with Ann Terry. I know both of them very well.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what my options are. I just know that there's somebody representing me that is saying something that I would not choose. So
can we make, I'm just gonna propose this, could you maybe update us at the board meeting on maybe looking at that a little bit, and then maybe we do look at bringing in an STA rep or somebody, like, what are we gonna do about this? I don't think that's a good idea. I know they're talking about it. I know Lakewood's talking about it. And, my general statement would be run for state legislator or county commissioner or, city council, which, it's the only way you're gonna affect change, but, that's,
I don't think she'll get $350,000 from certain entities.
yeah, I would miss money. There are, if it's worth a conversation, I don't know if that would affect SDA. I don't know that our district can affect an SDA policy. I mean, I don't know,
Kristen, would you add a section under legal for that discussion of legislative advocacy?
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think that-
I think in general, I would just say that I think it would be useful to have SDA or someone speak to the issue and the pros and cons of the issue and why they've selected the position they have. And then if the board decided to take a different position, I'm sure that SDA could advise how to provide that input and how best to submit that outside of or in addition to SDA's position. So how could this district have impact in that discussion, in that legislative discussion, if you don't agree with SDA? I don't see them trying to stop you from expressing a different opinion, but it would be useful to know their collective basis of why they have that stance. So I think a separate presentation or some information from them, a document or something, would provide helpful information to the board.
Short of inviting somebody to come and talk to us as a board, I'd suggest that we have lunch with Ann or Allison.
Who's the legislative liaison guy? Michael?
Mike Valdez.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great resource.
Yeah.
And just informally, if you wanted to just call and talk, if he's.
Personal relationships in this small SDA world mean a lot.
Yeah,
And I just suggest we do lunch at 240 Union. You want to come?
Would that be a board meeting?
No, there's two of us. And figure out what their perspective is and why they're there. And I mean, their strategy might be a little less obvious than you think. It might be much more subtle.
Why don't we start there and at least let's put a placeholder on under legal just for updates. I think the public needs to be aware of that. 'Cause that's the kind of stuff that no one ever sees it coming and then it hits you. And when you have a problem with people unilaterally making decisions, and especially in our government, I mean, you look at Canada, I don't want to be like Canada. I don't want somebody telling me what to do, unilaterally. I mean, we should have legal provisions and constitutions that, there should be a process and it shouldn't be just one day you're this. And
The
so,
board might vote to take your truck away from you.
over my dead body. So, all right. Now, anyway, all right, anything else on new business or notifications? Okay. I move to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second? Okay, I'll vote for
Aye.
adjourning. Aye.
Thank you all.
We have 5 voting yes. Alex, thank you. Staff, thank you for